Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mer Hersoner Podcast Season 3, Episode 18. We are live on YouTube, and I brought back Facebook as well, just for those of you who were complaining. Uh, it is Thursday, March 2nd, 2023. I'm your host, Vic Aslanyan, and as always, I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Mr. Mike Balyan, where we discuss our great Armenian history, covering different eras, topics, and people. Please hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed and share with your friends and family. Today's guest, well, what can I say? The backbone of our podcast, the man who's educated us for the past 2 years.
I promise you, this is not a deep fake, and it is not a clone. He's really here in the studio.
He's our dear friend. Here's our brother, Dr. Nazarian. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you, Vic. Thank you, Mike. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you guys finally in the studio. In the hub.
Yeah, where everything happens. I mean, we have been waiting for a while now for you to come to the States, to be with us. I know we've done lives through video. It's just not the same, obviously, and even for our audience, it's not the same. So thank you again. Appreciate it. There's one of the main reasons I wanted you here, because we've talked about doing that live event, which I'm going to mention right now, shortly, I should say. But can you, those of the audience member who might not know about you, I mean, if you don't know about him, that's...
Or maybe joined the movement a little late.
Yeah, late. We forgive you. Can you tell a little bit about yourself, your background, how you ended up kind of being a historian, your love for our nation, our country, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. I always loved our history since childhood. As far as I can remember, even our folk tales. I used to, like, as a little kid, I used to read. My parents used to read a lot of our folk tales, epics. For example, the Daredevils of Sassoon is a popular one that I really love from a very, very young age. As far as I can remember, I don't know, I was 3, 4, 5 years old. So I loved Armenian history, our own, heritage, culture from an early age. That was kind of instilled in me through my parents. I always loved it and wanted to know more and more.
Yeah.
And just basically it was a passion from a very, very young age. So I guess you can say that, my sort of like choice in pursuing Armenian history deeper and deeper was set from an early age. And then that's exactly what I did, after finishing high school. I actually, I was born and raised in Armenia, in Yerevan, but from a young age, we moved to the United States. It was still back then the Soviet Union, actually. Yeah. Armenia wasn't independent. I had some relatives here. Most of my relatives from my father's side were actually in the United States. They had moved in the 1970s. So we also moved a little bit later to the United States. But, like I said, this passion for our own history and culture, Armenian history and culture, had remained. And then I, pursued it further. I finished college. Then I pursued my passion at UCLA. I finished my BA and MA in Armenian history, in Armenian studies, which is more broad. It also includes our culture, literature, language. That's when we say Armenian studies, it's a broader, concept. So it includes all of that, our heritage, our cultural heritage as well. I finished my BA and MA at UCLA. Then I pursued my studies in Armenia. I worked in the National Archives of Armenia. And the reason I pursued it in Armenia is because we have so much documents and important documents in Armenia.
That's where all the good secrets are.
Exactly. The National Archives of Armenia, which is amazing. They have some amazing collections, to be honest. So any serious scholar, without doing work in the National Archive, on Armenian history, on modern Armenian history, of course, because as we know, like in ancient times. We don't have, archives,
Yeah.
Yeah.
not as we know them.
Yeah.
We have like some written inscriptions in stone and stuff like
Yeah.
that from the Kingdom of Ararat. But if you like, and my pursuit was actually more the modern period, late 19th, 20th century. So basically, the Armenian question broadly, then obviously reestablishment of Armenian independence, the First Republic,
Yeah.
and how the Armenian question was pursued by our political leaders at the Paris Peace Conference and other venues that followed, even in the 20th century. So absolutely, I did my PhD in Armenia. I finished my PhD recently, a couple of years ago. So I guess that's. But I love Armenian history in general, and
Yeah.
have been for the last 20, 30 years, even from a
Yeah.
very young age, I've been studying our history, and it's a passion. The more you study, the more you want to know. It's like.
Well, we our passion, obviously, I feel like the stars aligned, and
Somehow.
when somehow we were introduced to you, and I've mentioned it multiple times, you are the backbone, because all the content that we provide to you guys, all the factual content, is from this man and his colleagues.
Yes.
And we take that content, put a program together for you, so you can envision everything that we're talking about, reading, discussing, and at the same time we try to make it fun and light for everyone. So hopefully you guys appreciate that. Today's topic, we're going to be covering the First Republic of Armenia and its legacy. But before we jump into, I want to make a couple of announcements. First, everybody knows that if you follow us on our social media, you guys know that we are officially doing a live event, and this event is called Mer Talk. It's kind of like a TED Talk. It'll be a panel discussion. It will be with Nazarian. The topic will be exploring the cradle of civilization, and as you can see it on your screen, this event will be March 30th at 8 p.m. at the AGBU Arts Center in Pasadena. This is an amazing, beautiful theater. It holds 500 people. And those of you who have already purchased the tickets, thank you so much. We want to encourage everybody to join. If you guys see, there's a hashtag. I am obsessed with hashtags.
QR code.
The QR code on the corner. If you guys scan that, it will take you to the page where you can order your tickets. It's also, we pinned it on the live chat. You guys can click on that link. Tickets are $20 if you're just buying one, but if you buy more than one, it's the promo code you use is TAMART. It's TAMRAT, and that will give you half off. So basically, it's $10 a ticket, guys. It's nothing. This is only to help us to cover the cost of the theater.
Yeah.
This is all coming out
Literally.
of our pockets. We're doing this because we want to bring the community together. We want to educate everybody about our history. The other thing I want to mention is, to those of you who follow us, listen to us, if you are involved in Armenian schools, any type of associations, ASA, any of those, please get everybody involved. We want younger generation to show up. And those of you who are students, if you guys show up, we will give you some kind of a form which will be used as extra credit towards your history class. So again, we want to bring everyone together. There'll be social hours starting at 7 p.m. We'll have live music. We're going to have drinks, possibly even finger foods. We're working on all this stuff. And those of you who might want to be a sponsor, reach out to us. We still have a few spots left for sponsorship. You can email us at info@merhersoner.com, where we'll introduce you to the packages. Well, there's only 2 packages, but and if you want to be a sponsor, it'd be great. I want to thank Armen Living, who has become a sponsor. They're a furniture wholesale company. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it for helping us to at least take care of some of the cost, because we will be recordings. There's cameramen involved. There's so much involved in this. And Knees Printing, who's going to be helping us with all the printing, with the flyers and the posters and everything else that will be at the show. So again, go ahead and purchase your tickets. We want to see all of you there. Those of you who are local. So again, that will be on the 30th of this March of this month. The other thing I want to mention, I want to thank Manvel Khachatryan, who just joined Patreon. Thank you, Manvel. Those of you, you guys, we mention this all the time. If you want to support the show, we want you to support the show. This is how we make these type of things happen. There's two ways to support us. Either you go to patreon.com/Mer Hersoner, donate as little as $5. This will end up accumulating to a total amount that we use to do these type of events. We've mentioned about the animation that we're working on. So many things.
Beyond that, it's about educating, not just the diaspora, but our younger generation that hasn't grown up in Armenia and maybe hasn't seen Armenia. Not yet, at least, right? Our history is amazing. Our history is fascinating.
Yeah.
Beyond fascinating.
And the other way they can support us is if you're watching us on YouTube, there's a member button. You can become a member. It starts at $2.99 a month. I want to thank Charles Paskerian, who just became a member as well. That's another way to support us, becoming a member. And then once we have this community built, we will have special content that will be for members. We'll have special lives just for the members. So we want to bring everyone together, get this movement going. The Mer Hersoner movement is happening, guys. We started this for a reason, and we're not going to stop until the entire world knows the truth about our history, who we are as a people, so it can help us to move forward. Yes, to answer your question, yes, you can bring kids. It's open to the entire general public.
Yes.
Obviously, we won't be serving alcohol to the kids, but yeah.
And would like to have some refreshment.
Yeah, we encourage you to bring your kids, but obviously you have to make that decision if they are old enough to sit there and listen to a panel and understand. If you feel that you're comfortable with your children's age, then bring them. We want to see that, okay? But besides that, that's pretty much it. So, you guys ready?
Yeah, let's go. Right.
This is going to be a long one, guys. I just want you to know. So,
get your popcorn.
So again, like I said, the topic today is pretty much the First Republic of Armenia and its legacy. And we wanted to talk about this because it's very important and it ties into a lot of stuff that's happening today. But let's go back to 1918. First World War is over. All these nations are trying to figure out how to settle the mess that was created by Turkey, Germany. Can you describe what events led to the establishment of the First Republic of Armenia?
Well, absolutely, Mike. Well, yes, absolutely. It's a very important period in our history because, as we, named the podcast, is basically a time when Armenia was reborn from literally ashes. And if you permit me to talk a little bit what followed before that, so I can actually give a backdrop to what led to the reestablishment.
Of Armenian. You're part of the show.
Hold on, let's go to commercial break and discuss this.
Yeah. We need to sign a contract first.
Are we allowed to?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Basically, as you guys also talked about this in such a great way, we lost our independence in the 14th, 15th century. So for some centuries, for some period of almost 500 years, a little bit less, about 450 years, we didn't have our independence. There were local Armenian autonomous regions in mountainous areas of Armenia, but for most part, Armenia was not independent. Armenia was under a foreign domination. So our people, our leaders always dreamt of reestablishing Armenian independence, of reestablishing Armenian statehood. but the opportunity was not ripe. Let's say, for example, they tried in the 16th century, in the 17th century. And, I'm sure you guys will talk more about those attempts as you progress through the chronological timeline. You're in the Bagratuni period now.
We're still like 1,000 years
You're doing
away.
an amazing job, by the way. I didn't talk about that, but your commentary and analysis is amazing.
Thank you.
So thank you. Yes, absolutely.
You are
and I
best.
really mean it. So basically, we tried to reestablish, our leaders tried to reestablish Armenian independence, but they failed for a number of reasons, objective and subjective. So the opportunity basically was growing, but in the 19th century, there was also a very powerful Armenian national liberation movement. The Armenian question began in late 19th century. So we have to view the reestablishment of the Republic of Armenia in this context, in the context of the Armenian question. And, I don't want to delve too much into the Armenian question because maybe we can do a separate podcast on what was the Armenian question, and that would take away from our focus on the.
Well, we're going to use you as much as possible when you're here. So
I do have a question. Now, you're talking about how there was a movement in the 19th century, right? Or
Yes. 19th century. You're right.
To maybe earlier 19th.
Exactly. Yeah.
How did that movement begin? Right? I'm sure a lot of people would want to know how that movement began.
Great question.
Well, that's a great question. Absolutely. Basically, as I said, although we had lost our independence in the 14th century, but our leaders are always maintained the dream of reestablishing free and independent Armenia. Be it our nobility, even clergy, always try to find venues for reestablishing that independence. In the 19th century, they felt that, the foreign domination, which was mostly, Ottoman and Safavid, later Safavid and later other Iranian dynasties, Qajars and others, they had weakened. So they felt that, they were able to reestablish Armenian independence. So there was a very powerful national liberation movement in the 19th century in Eastern Armenia, and then, of course, later in the Western Armenia as well. And then basically after 1878, after the Russo-Ottoman War, Russo-Turkish War ended, again, this powerful drive for reestablishing Armenian independence. And of course, a lot of our leaders stated that if we want to develop fully as a free and independent people, we have to reestablish our independence. I mean, even the empires that dominated over us, such as the Ottomans and the Iranians, they recognized and realized that they ruled over a country that is called Armenia. Even, for example, if you look at the Ottoman maps of the period, they state even within the Ottoman Empire, the territory that is included is Armenia. So the Western Armenia, they even called it Armenia as a political entity in the 19th century.
Okay.
It was the province of Armenia, which they called Ermenistan, which in Turkish or Ottoman Turkish meant Armenia. It even was called that way. But later, as there was more sort of a drive for reestablishing Armenian independence. Well, actually, even basically respecting the rights of Armenians living in Armenia, because they were constantly trampled upon by the Kurds and the Turks, who had this bias attitude towards Armenians because of, most probably because of our religious difference, because we were Christians, they were Muslim, and that was a major dividing line for them. So there was a powerful prejudice and against Armenians, Armenians were not, there weren't like free and equal laws for the Armenians and the Muslims of the Ottoman Empire, because at the end of the day, the Ottoman Empire was a Muslim empire. It was a sultanate. It was a caliphate. I mean, the Ottoman Sultan that ruled at the time was also the caliph, or the grand ruler of all of Muslims of the world. So there was, the Sharia law, Islamic laws. So, obviously this prejudice and persecution also fueled the drive for Armenians to seek, at least if not independence. I mean, because initially Armenians didn't even seek independence. They were just trying to defend their rights as subjects of the Ottoman Empire. So it was more sort of like local autonomous rule within the Ottoman milieu, so to speak. But of course, unfortunately, we did talk about this earlier on. The Ottoman Sultan, which at this time was Abdulhamid II at the end of the 19th century, he answered the calls for this more sort of freedom and respecting the rights of the Armenian subjects with cold-blooded massacres. And the most major massacre, as we know, were the Hamidian massacres named after him. So basically, all of these events, I don't want to get into that. Obviously, the genocide of 1915 basically ushered in the tragedy that ultimately was also a triumph for us as a people, led to the reestablishment of the Republic of Armenia and restoration of Armenian independence in 1918. And maybe we can talk about the specifics around 1917, 1918.
Yeah, were there any events, let's say during World War I, not related to the genocide, like battles or maybe confrontations or skirmishes or something, whatever term you want to coin,
right,
that led up to 1918 and to, I guess, afterwards 1923 and whatever, when these decisions were being made?
Absolutely. Well, as we know, Mike, during World War I, the Ottoman Empire fought other foes, mainly Russia, right? And within this great campaign during the war, under the fog of war, they actually, carried out the Armenian genocide. So even in as late 1914, you can say the Armenian genocide began, because the Ottomans, they always, especially the young Turks, they realized that, in order to deal with the Armenian question, as I talked about earlier, they basically wanted an easy way out, basically get rid of the Armenians. And even Talat Pasha, one of the main organizers of the Armenian genocide, he said, if I have an Armenian question, then if I get rid of the Armenians, I wouldn't even have an Armenian question. So for him, that was basically a way out. He actually said that to Henry Morgenthau, the American ambassador to the Ottoman Empire. In this tragedy, when the Armenians were being exterminated in Western Armenia, and later on, even the Ottomans, once a number of upheavals also took place in Russia, namely in 1917, there was a revolution in March of 1917. It's actually called the February Revolution, but it happened in March because that's according to the old calendar, which is 13 days back.
Yeah.
So, so it happened in early March. There was a revolution in Russia. Russia, as a Tsarist Russia, actually fought against the Ottoman Empire, but the turmoil of the revolution actually helped the Ottomans indirectly, because it led to partial, if not complete, collapse of the Western Armenia front. So what happened earlier during World War I, the Russian troops actually conquered Western Armenia and actually established very firm defense line in Western Armenia as far as Yerzenka. So that's very deep into Western Armenia. But the March Revolution of 1917 actually led to the gradual disintegration of that front. But obviously, Armenians were not prepared to simply hand over Western Armenia to the Turks, right?
Yeah.
So there was a provisional government as soon as the revolution happened in Russia, which actually had a very pro-Armenian policy. It recognized Western Armenia as an Armenian land that would eventually be part of Armenia. And then ultimately there was a government led by the temporary government of Russia, which was the lawful actually government because it was recognized through referendum, led by Alexander Kerensky. That was the leader. He had a very pro-Armenian policy. He actually allowed formation of Armenian corps, Armenian armed forces, which were made up of 4 Armenian divisions. One of an important division was actually led by General Andranik. One of the it was called
We've
the West.
covered him, yeah.
We covered that period, right? So by 1917, this time late 1917, early 1918, already the Armenian Corps, as the general Russian front on the so-called Caucasus front, which was actually the Western Armenia front, was collapsing. And Armenian armed forces were gradually being formed through the Armenian Corps, made up of this important 4 divisions. 3 divisions, basically, you can say, from, a mixture of Eastern Armenians, thousands and thousands of Armenian volunteers from the United States.
Yeah.
From France, they actually went and became part of the Armenian Corps.
Armenians or just
Armenians from the United States,
Yeah.
as much as it's an estimate, but I think it's close to the actual numbers. As much as 10,000 Armenians from the United States were part of the Armenian Corps.
And this is back then.
Back then, back then. That's amazing.
Now, can I? When you say Western Armenia, is that what was actually called, or are we just saying that to kind of describe the area?
No, at that time you would hear more in literature called Ottoman or Turkish Armenia.
Okay.
But when they said Turkish Armenia, it meant that part of Armenia that was previously occupied and was part of the Ottoman Empire, right?
Yeah.
Even the Turks themselves, at one point they called it Armenia, but then when the Armenian question progressed, they said, wait a minute, when we keep calling this land Armenia, then it might, actually
you're giving a title to
you're
these
giving
people,
a title, which is the actual title to Armenians, to their claims,
to
the people. So let's replace it with this artificial term called Anatolia, and they replace the term Armenia or Ermenistan in Turkish or Ottoman Turkish with Anatolia or Anadolu in Turkish. Or Doğu Anadolu, which means Eastern Anatolia, which is a joke because we know that historically Anatolia during the Byzantine times was immediately east, this brief area in western part of Asia Minor, east of Constantinople was called Anatolia.
Yeah.
It's a Greek term. It means the east,
Yes.
the east of the Constantinople. Armenia was never part of Anatolia, never ever.
Yeah.
So this is a fake term, but this was a political move on part of Turkey to basically sideline and eventually replace the name Armenia for Western Armenia. It had a political connotation to it.
Makes sense, right?
Not that I'm, supporting what they're saying or what they did, but again, it makes sense what they did.
It's a political move.
Of course it is. Absolutely. They basically verbally announced that this was a sector or province of their empire.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, even today, many Armenians buy into this. They call Anatolia is an Armenian homeland and things like that. I'm sorry, that's not correct.
No, it's
you would even see scholars today, like in Armenian studies here in the United States,
map, it's not.
They're using Eastern Anatolia for Armenia. I'm sorry, that's unacceptable. That's just historically inaccurate,
Well, that's the
and
problem.
serves a political agenda.
Yeah, that's the problem. Soft power.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody who's joining us live on YouTube and Facebook. If you guys, if to the audience member, if you guys have any questions while we're having this discussion, please feel free to ask your question, and then we'll bring it up.
I'll stop everything.
Mike is in charge of that. Georg, I know we have some slides. Do you want to bring that on now?
Yes, sure.
Okay. All right.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's an example of what I was just saying minutes ago. This is a British map from, I believe, 1895, so late 19th century. As you can see, they marked Turkish Armenia. Remember, you asked, were people using the term Western Armenia? Well, they were using Turkish Armenia and Russian Armenia to describe Western part of Armenia under Ottoman rule. This is, remember, from 1895. So this is basically that part of Armenia for them, that was under Ottoman Turkish rule. And they also outlined Russian Armenia, that part of Eastern Armenia that was under Russian rule.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And here we actually see the front. Remember, I told you that the Armenian volunteer detachments, Andronik and others, and the Russian army extended. This is, again, a British map showing the line of advance up to 1917, 1918, when the Western Armenia...
Is that the dotted line?
Dotted line, exactly.
So they were basically covering all the way up to the Black Sea.
I mean,
Right.
Lake Von right there?
Well, I mean, all the way north.
Yeah, all the way
though.
north. Yeah,
Exactly.
right.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is, I mean, if memory serves me correct, which is around what, like Rize?
Yes,
right.
yes. Well, Trebizond, Trebizond.
Yeah.
So up to that area. And guys, remember this outline? Later on, when even the arbitrary award was made, this was taken into consideration because they said since the line of advance of Armenian volunteers and other detachments was this far, President Wilson also took this into consideration when he made the outline. We'll cover that of the Republic of Armenia.
Yeah. Treaty of Batum. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay.
What is it? What it entails?
Since it's on the map.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, as I said, we already had the Armenian Corps or the National Corps, which was the armed forces of Armenia. Although Armenia was still not there, the Republic of Armenia was not established. But by late 1917, we already had Armenian armed forces that were formed from these Armenian volunteer detachments. Serving in the Russian and other allied armies, the French armies, American army, all these, soldiers flocked to form the Armenian Corps, National Corps. And then by 1918, as I said, when the front collapsed, there was another coup in Russia. It wasn't a revolution. It was actually a coup. Sometimes they call it a revolution. The Bolsheviks took over because they overthrew the provisional government of Alexander Kerensky in November of 1917. That's, again, it's called the October Revolution, but it wasn't a revolution. It didn't take place in October because it was neither a revolution, didn't take place in October. It happened on November 7, and it was a coup. So basically, they took over the government. They forced Kerensky to flee. And then after that, the collapse of the Russian front in Western Armenia was total. So basically, the Armenian armed forces were alone against this Ottoman Turkish war machine.
Yeah.
The and then the Turks sort of like by early 1918, in February of 1918. After all of the Russian armies fled and left Western Armenia, returned home because Lenin, he said, no, we're not going to fight in this war. He actually concluded a separate treaty with the Central Powers, which included the Ottoman Empire, the Germany, which was an ally of the Ottoman Empire, and others. It was historians have dubbed it as a shameful treaty. By that Brest-Litovsk treaty, in March of 1918, he agreed to hand over not only Western Armenia, but large swaths of land in Eastern Europe to Germany. So to the Turks, Lenin agreed to hand over Western Armenia, even parts of Eastern Armenia, which included Kars and Ardahan area. There was actually a provision in the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk of March of 1918 that there was supposed to be a referendum in parts of Eastern Armenia, in Kars and Ardahan, that would to decide what part of country they want to be. But that never happened. Turks even trampled upon that. They never had this referendum. Later, they had a sham referendum, which was not recognized.
So what? They gave them like the illusion or the delusion of maybe having a referendum. Is that
they
that's
made
what
a
it sounds
fake
like? Yeah.
referendum. Actually, the Turks actually did the same in the
Formality.
in late 1930s. They did that there's this area of Cilicia called the Armenian Gulf or Alexandretta Gulf of Alexandretta. That there's this territory. They also did the same in 1938-39, the sham referendum. They bust basically Turks in who sort of voted, and they had a Turkish majority vote that it wants to be part of Turkey. But in actuality, the population was mostly made up of Armenians and Arabs. Arabs and Armenians, you know. And by the way, we did talk about this in Cilicia episode. And the Armenians of that area, the Musalerti Armenians, they were forced to leave because of that. And they went to Anjar and these places in Lebanon and Syria because of that. But anyway, coming back to our topic, so basically, the Turks in 1918, they attacked the Armenian National Corps. Andranik defended the Karin front. He held out for some time, but you know the numbers were overwhelming. Obviously, you have a regular Ottoman Empire forces and armed forces, and just formed basic national corps. It was just basically forming, which would be the nucleus of the future armed forces of the Republic of Armenia. But to our credit, we did score 3 very important battles, victories, 2 basically you can say victories for sure. In May of 1918, when the Turks actually were able to penetrate even eastern Armenia, there were core battles in Sardarabad, in Aparan, and Vanadzor or Ghara Kilisa, and then very important victories were achieved in Sardarabad and Aparan, which basically, the Ottoman Turks were actually surprised by, how these sort of like, for them,
they were like volunteers.
Yeah.
I remember you spoke about it during the Andranik episode.
Exactly. So
there was a gang of volunteers that just jumped in and like, okay, well, what do we do?
Undermanned, undergunned, but facing this Ottoman, because when I say the Ottoman army, I mean, it had this very powerful military tradition. It was actually from the late 19th century. It was trained by Germans. So they had very good officer corps. They had very good generals. The Ottoman army, it was, trained in this Prussian military tradition, while our own armed forces, as you said, mostly were made up of these volunteers. But we scored these important victories in Sardarabad and Aparan. So the Turks, they wanted to annex all of Armenia, even eastern Armenia. But these victories forced the Turks to recognize that, wait a minute, Armenians are a factor. Armenians are able to fight back. So they decided to sit at the diplomatic table and reach some kind of agreement with the Armenian side, even if it was temporary agreement. So this was the Treaty of Batum. On June 4, they actually had this treaty with the Armenian side, which recognized the Republic of Armenia, but they only agreed to recognize the Republic of Armenia on a very small swath of territory, covering a small portion of eastern Armenia.
I have a question about the Treaty of Batum. Who organized this? Who suggested the Treaty of Batum? Like, was there like some? I guess maybe it's a stupid question. Was there some sort of watchdog group or countries or individuals that were overseeing the situation?
Like a League of Nations type of thing?
Whatever the case is, something like that. Who was the one that suggested, hey, okay, you guys need to talk. Let's use Batum as the city where we need to do these or have these discussions?
Very good question, Mike. So it wasn't only the Armenian side that actually wasn't negotiating
Or
with.
who initiated this?
Right. Negotiating with the Turks, with the Ottomans. The Georgians and the Tatars, who later started calling themselves Azeris, but they were at this time mostly called Tatars. Sometimes Muslims, sometimes just Turks, whatever. They didn't have a specific name, to be honest. And there was never a nation by the name of Azerbaijan prior to 1918. Anyway, these people, they also were in negotiating with the Turks. The Turks mostly had sympathies with the Tatars of this area of they were called Tatars of Caucasus.
So the settlers of what modern day Azerbaijan is,
Yes.
they were Tatars.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, who had close sort of they felt kinship with the Turks. Although religiously they weren't Sunni. The Turks are Sunni Turks. They were Shia.
Now, another question I have. Sorry, I'm bombarding you with all this stuff because I'm curious too. Is the Tatars of the modern day Azerbaijani region, were they settled in that area for a long time? Just quick question.
Right. Well, their ancestors started to arrive not even in the 11th century, because those 11th century Seljuks, they weren't the Tatars, the so-called Azeris of today. So their ancestors, most probably, they were like in the 14th, 15th century, arrived from Central Asia as nomads. They conquered parts of Armenia and parts of northern Iran, what is northern Iran. And then they weren't even called Azeris. They were called by different tribal names.
Tribals, yeah.
They were Turkic-speaking people. They spoke Oghuz Turkic dialect of Turkish, and they conquered the natives, including Armenians, including other Iranian peoples, including other Caucasian peoples, the Albanians and others, and they tried to impose their rule upon them. But they lived a nomadic lifestyle. They never settled down. They were known for their sheep. And for example, it's kind of funny. They were even known, these early ancestors of so-called Azeris, they were known by the name of the flock of sheep that they grazed. So, for example, there was this confederation called the Karakoyunlu, which in Turkic, Oghuz Turkic, means the black sheep. The confederation of the black sheep, which means that mostly they grazed sheep that was black. They had black, fur, so they were called the black sheep. And then they were followed by a confederation called the Akkoyunlu, which means the white sheep. Yeah. So the confederation of black and white sheep.
Wow. Interesting. There was prejudice against sheep.
Yeah.
Black sheep. No, we have white sheep.
Yeah. They actually fought against each other, and they were the greatest enemies. The Karakoyunlu were ultimately defeated by the Akkoyunlu, the white sheep confederacy.
Interesting. Again, I want to thank everybody who's joining us live on YouTube and Facebook. Please hit that like button. You see it below your screen. Subscribe, and please share with family and friends. Get everybody over here, and feel free to ask any questions, and we will pass it on to Gevorg. So continuing.
Yeah, sorry, I keep bombarding you with questions about.
How dare you?
I mean, it's interesting to me, So, but when all of these skirmishes were happening, and they had some sort of maybe an avenue to liberation, right? Which we know historically it did happen. What type of government were they aiming to establish, or what type of leadership were they looking for? What type of system were they looking for to establish, to maybe either separate themselves from the Ottomans? And of course you have the Russians in the north, or the Bolsheviks at this time, which was kind of forming at the time. What were they looking for? What was their goal?
Right. That's a great question, Mike. So as I said, so even Armenian independence was proclaimed after the victories, these major victories that we talked about. It's considered May 28, 1918. Some say, well, it's actually May 30th, because there was an Armenian National Council in Tiflis or Tbilisi, what is today capital of Georgia. So the Armenian National Council operating there, it actually proclaimed the Republic of Armenia after these victories. And the Turks, they were forced to basically recognize, the Republic of Armenia, because like I said, if there wasn't resistance on the Armenian part, they were just simply wanted to annex, and they pursued the young Turks that ruled the Ottoman Empire at this time, Turkey at this time. They pursued this pan-Turkist goal of creating Turan, this vast Turkic empire, uniting the Tatars that we talked about of the Caucasus, and even beyond the Caspian Sea, uniting parts of Central Asia, uniting parts of what is today Russia, the Russian Federation, and creating this vast Turkic empire, basically ruled by the Turks. The Turks of Turkey would be the elite, and these other Turkic peoples as vassals, they would actually, be led by the Turks of Turkey.
Now, the Tatars, just for our audience, I mean, I know, but the Tatars were basically based from centuries prior out of the Mongol movement east.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah.
Well, to be honest,
More
Mike,
or less.
the Mongols weren't Turkic. I want to clarify that.
Seljuks?
No. The Mongols, under, like, for example, Genghis Khan,
Genghis
etc.,
Khan,
they were Turkic people. They deployed Turkic peoples as their warriors, generals, leaders. The Tatars were
and whatnot.
exactly.
Yeah.
Tatars were Turkic, but not the Mongols. Mongols were the elite in the 13th century under Genghis Khan. Sometimes it's erroneously the Mongols are associated with the Turks or Turkish, but they're not. They were the elite, and they knew that they're not Turkics. And for them, like, for example, no one could rise in the Mongol Empire. A Turkic or another nationality could never be a Mongol Khan.
Yeah.
Of course.
Of Genghis Khan. You had to show direct descent from Genghis Khan.
They kept it in their
They were only generals. There were other later offshoot Mongol Turkic kingdoms, but that wasn't the real Mongol empire created by Genghis Khan, who was not a Turkic man. No, they were Turkic people from Central Asia. They were nomads. Even, they considered their homeland as Altai, which is in today's southern Russia. But even Altai, when they do archaeological digs there, the oldest found archaeological evidence is Indo-European there. The burial mummies, etc., are not Turkic because they were a Turkic people. They were living a nomadic lifestyle, probably in parts of what is Siberia, not even the Altai area, further east. But returning back to this period, exactly. So basically these victories usher in the establishment of the Republic of Armenia. And like you said, our leaders had very powerful convictions that once we reestablish our independence, we're going to choose a republican form of government. And that's exactly what they did. I mean, there were some proponents of, let's say, having a constitutional monarchy.
That's what I was trying to get at. Yeah, what were they looking for? What were they trying to establish?
They believed that, a republic with a parliamentary government, parliamentary democracy as a republic is the best form of government. And, we actually had these ideas in the 18th century with the Armenian Enlightenment, and I think we'll have a chance to cover that once you guys get to the 18th century. You'll talk about that.
We got a long time.
Yeah, about like what, 2024,
25.
So, we'll talk about the 18th century. We talk about the Madras group, our Enlightenment leaders operating actually in all of the places in India, in Calcutta, in places like that, Madras, Shahmirian, Baghramian, and others, who believed that, we actually had our first constitution predates the American Constitution of all the things. We had in 1773, these people, you'll talk about this more in detail later on, we established, they preached that we should reestablish Armenian independence based on the republican form of government, Shahmirian and others. And then,
this is what year?
1773. So we're talking about second half of the 18th century, before the American Revolution.
Wow.
Armenian constitution is considered one of the oldest. It predates the American. The difference is that the American and let's say the French and the Polish constitutions were adopted by these nations.
Yeah, I was
but
about
the
to say.
Armenian was remained on paper. You know, but we had it earlier.
Wow.
Hey, what about me? Hey, what about me? You
Wow,
know?
I feel like there's so many missed opportunities of how history could have just gone a different route, basically. That's unbelievable.
Absolutely,
That's
it is. But
Yeah.
it's just
No,
an
there's-
amazing facet of our history, and we'll cover it more in detail when that time comes. But like I said, you know, already this idea of Armenia as a republic, as a parliamentary democracy, blossomed by this time. So, you know, it was kind of natural. There were some proponents of having a constitutional monarchy instead of a republic, but it was pretty much rejected by all the major Armenian parties of the period.
Yeah.
But why? Why was it rejected?
Well,
What was the opposition to trying to gain an independence?
that's a very good question. But you know, Mike,
It's almost like, sorry, really quick. It's almost like saying beggars can't be choosers. So if you have an opportunity here,
right.
what was the opposition to it?
You mean why have a different form of government or
Sure.
Well, right. Well, for most part, because to be honest, at this time, the Republican ideas, democracy, republic was sort of like en vogue. What they say, it was kind of very much also the trend was towards that direction. So like monarchies, even constitutional monarchies, you know, I hope our audience knows the difference between constitutional and absolute monarchy.
yeah.
Constitutional is more like what you even have today in Britain, for example. Prime Minister,
and
you know,
then
it's technically,
parliamentary,
it's
yeah.
parliamentary, but,
Yes.
you know, there's a figurehead, right?
Yes.
But who doesn't have real power. But like in absolute monarchy, the monarch and the monarchy has the power, you know? But even constitutional monarchy was considered not enough, not, you know, sort of not forward enough, or I don't know what to say. So, so like the proponents of the Republican and parliamentary democracy, even in Armenian intelligentsia mostly, right? Because when we're talking about like the leadership of Armenia during this time, intelligentsia was setting the course for Armenia, right? So
as usual.
Yeah, and most of our intelligentsia, to be honest, was groomed and educated in Europe, in places like Europe, maybe Russia. So they were also very much influenced by these ideas, these Republican ideas.
Of course.
So for them, it seemed a natural choice that when we have our state, it would be Republic of Armenia. It wouldn't be, although technically, as a legal and diplomatic term, even in the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, the term Republic of Armenia was never used. It was always the state of Armenia. So when you say the state of Armenia, it's kind of
It belongs to
vague.
somebody.
No, it's vague. You don't say what kind of a state it is. It can be theocracy. It can be like a monarchy. It can be a republic. You don't state what kind of government it has.
Very
Interesting.
That's a very important legal diplomatic jargon that was used, and was right that it was used.
Wow.
Until the Republic of Armenia as such was recognized in 1920 by the Allies and the Paris Peace Conference.
It's fascinating. Like the information that
the legalese, as I like to call it, the legalese.
I want to thank again everybody who's joining us. We are live on YouTube and Facebook with Dr. Georg Nazarian. We are talking about the First Republic of Armenia and its legacy. Obviously, World War I had a big impact. Let's talk about a little bit about the, is it the Armustos of Mudros? Is that how they pronounce it? Yeah,
Yes.
Armustos of Mudros. Can you talk about that a little bit and explain so our audience can understand what this was and what kind of an impact the end of World War I had?
Well, absolutely. We can't. The Armistice of Mudros is important on so many levels. For example, as I said, even when the Republic of Armenia, according to Treaty of Batum, was established, it covered a very small area that only encompassed a small portion of eastern Armenia. So, you know, roughly the territory from Lake Sevan to Yerevan. It's very, very. But the thing is, even Ottoman ally Germany said, it never recognized the Treaty of Batum. The Turks, according to the Armistice of Mudros, they actually acknowledged their obviously defeat. They signed their defeat with the British. The British were obviously part of the Allied side, right? The Allies were made up of various countries led by, Great Britain, France, Italy. In 1917, the United States also joined, and others. But those were the major 4 or 5 powers if you include Japan, because during this time Japan was part of also the Allies.
They were.
Yeah. Turkey acknowledged its defeat with the Armistice of Mudros that was signed on October 30th, 1918. So after that, basically, they also acknowledged that they had occupied parts of Armenia. They agreed to withdraw to the territory of at least the 1914 pre-war boundary. So Kars and Ardahan and other parts of eastern Armenia, Artsakh, Nakhichevan, all these areas the Turks had to withdraw to the and automatically they also, by the Armistice of Mudros, they acknowledged that the Treaty of Batum was no longer. So
this is why I was kind of staring up into space, was if the Armistice of Mudros exceeds or supersedes the Treaty of Batum, again, it goes back to what you were saying. What was the point of the Treaty of Batum?
That's a very...
And I'm not trying to go backwards here.
Yeah.
So what was the point?
That's a very good question, Mike. The Treaty of Batum, although it was never recognized under international law and never recognized by the Allies and the other, international community, it led to the de facto sort of creation of an Armenian government in Yerevan.
Okay, so there was a significance to it.
Absolutely.
To an extent. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The Allies never recognized Treaty of Batum. Even Turkey's allies never recognized the Treaty of Batum.
But in a way, from what you're saying, it worked almost like a negotiation piece.
Yes, it just basically bought time and led to the de facto establishment of a government of Yerevan. Remember I talked about the Armenian National Council of Tiflis?
Yes.
That formed the core of the Armenian government that would establish after the proclamation of Republic of Armenia after May 28, 1918. From Tiflis, members of the Armenian National Council moved, because Tiflis was a major hub that basically was the important city. At this time, by the way, Tiflis had more Armenians living there than Georgians. I mean, for example.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, because we have an interesting question from David Sakayan.
Sahakyan, yeah.
Sahakyan. Yeah, he's asking if you can go ahead and read that.
Can Gevorg please talk about the skirmishes the First Republic of Armenia had with Georgians? I feel like a lot of focus was, in parentheses, and still is, about the Turks and Tatars or Azeris.
Sure. That happened at the end of 1918. So we're actually chronologically kind of there. So after Mudros, I wouldn't even call it a war, although you're right, it's called a war, but it was more like skirmishes, if not a skirmish, several battles. That happened in late 1918, December of 1918, and by January of 1919, that was over, so it was a very brief period. So the Georgians, they basically had occupied parts of northern Armenia, these areas of Lori, Javakh, etc. The reason I say they occupied, because it was always Armenian populated. There were no Georgians living in this area. And they simply, based on the fact that they said, during the Tsarist times, this was the Tiflis gubernia. Tiflis, but it belongs to us. I mean, Armenia said, wait a minute, historically, it's like 99% Armenian. There are no Georgians living here.
If we historically go back.
Right.
I mean, historically, if you go back, Georgia it was Armenian kings. Come on.
Well, I mean, well, I don't know. It's even today, oftentimes, even Georgian academics, historians, they would have they would try to sort of debate and try to sort of belittle or diminish Armenian input in Georgia.
Yeah.
But if you look at it objectively, it's huge. I mean, the Armenian input in Georgia. And later on, of course, it was a mutual, like during the Bagratuni period, it was a mutual cooperation. But initially, Armenian input, cultural input, political input, or like even religious input. I mean, look at the earliest Georgian texts. I mean, it's the earliest Georgian text written in Georgian is dedicated to the daughter of Vartan Mamikonya, Shushanik.
Yeah.
That's the first text in Georgia.
Yeah.
Hostilities with Georgia. Unfortunately, it arose because of certain Georgian policies, but the Armenian side was never interested to pursue it further. Obviously, our foes that were a threat were on to the west and the east of Armenia.
Yeah.
And that continued even today. So that was an I would say an event that that sort of facilitated that establishment of Lori neutral zone in late 1918, which eventually, even today's Lori is part of Armenia. I mean, of course, it's kind of, their stake at claiming this territory as Georgia. It's like if you have a 99% Armenian population and you say it's going to be part of Georgia, it's just...
Yeah, I mean, that's crazy.
It's crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, first of all, again, I want to thank everybody who's joining us live on YouTube. Thank you for the question, David. Those of you who have more questions, again, feel free and bring it up on the screen for Gevot.
Please ask more.
Obviously, again, I want to mention, you guys see it on the screen, the Mer Talk event, which is exploring the cradle of civilization. You guys can scan that code and purchase your tickets. Use promo code TAMART, that's TAMART, and you'll get half off if you buy 2 or more. We want everybody there. So buy it for your friends, family, bring your kids, at least kids who are old enough to understand what we're going to be talking about. As you can see, the information that was being fed from this amazing man who can recite the entire Armenian history. It is unbelievable. So again, we want to see you guys there. Scan that code, get your tickets. So continuing.
Now, with everything, and even his question about what was happening in 1918, 1919, there had to have been, let's say, some alliances that may or may not have contributed to the things that preceded this time period, right? Whether they be, and this kind of piggybacks off of a question I was asking earlier, was who facilitated things, who looked after things, what part of the allies, some of the major, let's call them the first world nations, not trying to paint a picture in that sense, but there had to be individuals or countries that facilitated these things or overlooked things or maybe were allies with the Armenian cause.
That's a great question, right? Mike. Absolutely. Armenians, as I said, even during World War I, already sort of, although, as I said, like even during World War I, already sort of, showed at least political leadership of the Armenian people, sympathies to the Allies. So although those Armenians, for example, like subjects in the Ottoman Empire, they did their duty as soldiers of the Ottoman Empire, for example. But there were many volunteers, Armenian volunteers in thousands that joined allied armies. An Armenian legion was for example, an Armenian legion was formed in the French army. Thousands of Armenians volunteered not only for the American army, but also they came and, as I said, became eventually part of the Armenian volunteer detachment that fought, first of all, in the Russian army, and then later on also formed a part of the Armenian Corps after 1917, because Armenian Corps in itself was formed on the Armenian volunteer detachments. We talked about the Armenian volunteer detachments in the Andranik episode, General Andranik episode, right? So they actually eventually formed the Armenian Corps, but it was made up a lot of these volunteer Armenians, thousands and thousands. As I said, even thousands came just from the United States, thousands came from France, tens of thousands came from Russia. Armenians by the Allied powers were recognized as an allied nation, allies, as part of, when I say allied nation, I don't say just allied, I say allied with a capital A, not because it was a name, the Allies, it wasn't not just they were allies, but they were known as the Allies. The opponents were known as the Central Powers. So Germany...
this is specific to World War I.
Exactly, World War One. Okay. Because that changed in World War... For example, Japan was part of the Allies, but then in the World War II it was Axis, right?
Axis powers.
Right. Italy also, it was Allied in Allies, part of the Allies in World War One, then it switched. Actually, they switched because they had these grievances. They felt that in the Paris Peace Conference and the Treaty of Versailles, they weren't treated a fair hand. They did more, and then they felt kind of cheated, Italy and Japan, and that's why they actually in World War II chose the other side. But that's a different topic for a maybe different podcast, not for the Mer Hersoner.
I would love to hear about that.
Mike keeps hinting on starting another podcast on his own, so maybe when he starts his World War podcast, we can talk about them. Do we want to show that video?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, so...
well, not now. Maybe go to the slides, if we may, Vahe, because we have a couple of... Yeah,
there we go.
Okay. So, President Woodrow Wilson, who was the president during World War I, right? He was a great friend of the Armenian people, and I actually want to talk about why. That wasn't just by hap chance that he just liked Armenians out of nowhere. The reason being is because... a lot of Americans already had a very strong presence in Western Armenia.
Yeah.
They were known as the missionaries. And I think we'll have a chance to talk about more Armenian-American ties later on, perhaps on a separate...
We're going to have another episode.
Separate episode. So, like in the 19th century, a lot of Americans came to Western Armenia and developed a close ties with the Armenian community. Christian missionaries.
Yeah.
They were actually, Protestants, right? So they kind of like, they had the Protestant creed. So a lot of Armenians also adhered to that. We had the growth of the Armenian Protestant community, but also closer Armenian-American ties during this time. For example, even before the genocide, before the Hamidian massacres, you would have Armenians coming to the United States with the missionaries. Even in like 1880s, you had a growing Armenian community in places like Fresno, in parts of East Coast, in places like Boston.
Yeah.
In 1880s, already there was a growing Armenian community. This was as a part of interaction. In turn, the Americans, the missionaries, they established schools, they established different educational, other like colleges, etc., in Western Armenia. So there were a lot of Americans already investing themselves. They were volunteers actually, in Western Armenia. So there was this close interaction. So
well, I think that also had to do with the whole movement during the genocide, where it was Save the Armenians. I mean, there was a big movement that happened here in the United States. You had famous actors involved. They raised about like $50 million, which is to today's date, it's a lot of money.
Absolutely.
So there was, and they helped with the orphans, right? I mean, there's pictures of the orphans standing and saying thank you. that kind of, I think it sprung from there and led into, after the genocide, to them investing their time to the missions that they had in Western Armenia.
Absolutely. And, if we didn't have the missionaries in Western Armenia at this time, we're in thousands and thousands. Even many of these missionaries were killed during the Armenian genocide, by the way,
because they were protecting them.
They were protecting the Armenians. They would give them shelter. They would protect them. They would hide them. And they were killed by the Turks. That's, again, not many people don't know that, Some died because of disease, because a lot of the Armenians after the genocide, the survivors, they all also had typhus and diseases like this. So they also died, these missionaries, because of that. Woodrow Wilson was actually a firm believer of this. So he believed that this relationship with the Armenians should further increase, and he was a great proponent of Armenian independence and close alliance with Armenia. So free, united, and independent Armenia as an ally of United States. This is what Woodrow Wilson believed, and he actually, with his own hand, after the armistice of Mudros, outlined the borders of Armenia, which were known as Armenia from sea to sea, and we'll actually see the maps. And this was actually officially pursued by the American government at the Paris Peace Conference. So after the armistice of Mudros, it was decided that there's going to be a peace conference which would decide the fate of the defeated Central Powers, right? Germany, Ottoman Empire, other countries like Bulgaria, etc., Austria-Hungary. There was all of these nations were part of the Central Powers. So in the Paris Peace Conference, also what they call,
I was going to ask you about that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Okay.
But just to a side note, the guest we had, Mike Cunningham, he's all about genealogy and everything. He has I guess
knowledge about that time period.
Yeah, he actually has I guess traced Woodrow Wilson to be of Armenian heritage, connecting to King John and so forth.
Like a long
and even
lineage.
two of his wives, right? Two of his wives.
So
that
memory serves me right.
So I always wondered, do you think they knew something or
they found out something?
Have
you heard?
I haven't.
But I'm saying, why would he have cared, like as an American president?
It's a good question. I mean,
why would he have cared about the Armenians?
Speaking, politically speaking, what was I don't want to think.
And I'll go back to the Paris Peace Conference.
This way, but what was in it for him, or what was in it for the American government? You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
What
there's always something, right?
There has to be something politically or geopolitically or bureaucrats and all these types of things, right?
Well,
there has to be.
Great. Yeah, that's a great question. I actually wanted to cover that, and since it came up now, maybe I was thinking later, but I should cover it now.
You tell us. You want to talk about it now, later?
We're just going to ask you questions.
Yeah.
So Woodrow Wilson was a firm believer that, United States should take a more proactive policy throughout the world.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't know, maybe depends how you look at it, he was opposed to that by the Republicans, who were more sort of thinking, this, pursuing this Monroe Doctrine. If you know the Monroe Doctrine, that United States should focus mainly in the Americas, so just like Northern America, and maybe they can look at Latin or Southern America also, so like a backyard of United States but Wilson was saying, no, that's such an outdated doctrine, because the world is changing. It's and World War I was actually, or at that time, as it was known, the Great War. It wasn't, because the World War II hadn't happened, right?
That was considered the
they
Great
were calling
War.
it the Great War. So the Great War actually signaled that we can no longer have this isolationist policy, because that policy was known as isolationism, or even some called it ultra, called it splendid isolationism. He said there's nothing splendid about that because the world has changed. It's basically as the saying goes, if you don't get involved in politics, politics will get involved with you
Somehow.
You can't just you're not an island. You can't just sit it out and wait for these things to happen. We're so interconnected. If we don't get involved, they're going to be involved with us. So he believed that, there are these places throughout the world, such as Armenia, which would be important stepping stones for American projection of American influence, American interests, American power. And he was a firm believer that Armenia, united Armenia from sea to sea, a vast area, including portions of Western
Can we show that map?
Yes, please, let's show the map.
No.
Well, this is actually, let me briefly, this is actually Wilson and top leaders in the White House, meeting with Armenian representatives, Armenian spiritual and political elites. In 1916, late 1916, December of 1916, this is a
wider shot.
This is a wider shot. As you can see, there's also, Armenian leader, Armenian spiritual leader of the Armenian community. No, it's actually not the Catholicos, Mike. It's the spiritual leader of United States.
Okay.
Arsen Vehuni.
That's right. No, we talked about this. I think not by name, but might have mentioned this. Not by name.
So, this is the Archbishop of United States of Armenian Church, who was also the spiritual leader of the Armenian community.
This is in 1916,
December of 1916.
Wow.
Wilson in front of the White House.
Wow.
He has the Armenian delegation, members of the White House, members of the Congress meeting with the Armenian leaders.
That is amazing.
At this time, there was the genocide was obviously raging, so they're discussing the efforts to save the remnants of the Armenian people, the Near East relief.
Well, this is where that movement
started. Because the Near East relief started immediately when the genocide was happening in 1915, right?
And what are we looking at here?
We're looking at some of the Armenian volunteers that I talked about that joined the Armenian, the Allied and Armenian formations, volunteer formations, fighting on the Allied side from the United States.
Yeah, with
Armenian Americans.
Right, I think.
Look at those flags in the background.
Because Andranik led the first regiment, but there were many regiments, up to 7 regiments.
Okay. Wow, that's amazing. Look at those faces. Look at all those young Armenian Americans.
They immediately joined as soon as World War I unfolded.
This is over 100 years ago.
It's amazing how when the motherland calls, go.
Right.
And it doesn't matter.
But an important point I don't want to digress, but it's important to make. It was all organized by the leaders of the Armenian American community. Sometimes people say, well, how come more Armenian Americans don't volunteer, for example, today or when the war happened,
politics,
2020, different politics. But Vic, just as importantly, all these people, they were paid, financed, and like everything was directed. This is what you do. They were given a uniform, a gun, how to do it. Everything was done and organized by them, by the community leaders, which is not being done today.
Yeah, Georg, but the difference is that you have an Armenian government now that obviously didn't allow that to happen. Not to go into the war of 2020, but because a lot of us we were ready to go, but
exactly
they wouldn't allow it.
Point. Sometimes they blame individual Armenians of US and saying, how come you're not doing more? But the thing is, wait, it's up to, for example, Armenian leadership, both of the Republic of Armenia and community leaders to actually help. You can't just leave everything on the shoulders of an individual.
But that's the thing. There was individuals who got up and left. They got there. They were like, you can't do anything.
So much harder, Vic. This time it was all organized. It was all organized, financed. They were shown this is the way.
Here the U.S. was allowing it.
And the U.S. government was also
allowing it. So it's a big difference. So because you hear a lot of chatter about like they talk about the Armenians that were here. Why didn't you go and fight over there and this and that? Well, it's not as easy as now to just get up and go and fight. If it was, trust me, I mean during the war you had over 10,000 Armenians at the border of Georgia that weren't allowed to go. I mean there's no way to get in. There was no way, and whoever got in when they went and tried to actually pick up arms, they wouldn't allow them. Not just that. They would ask you, where are you from? If you were a U.S. citizen, they wouldn't give you anything, the volunteers. So that was, I mean, there's more involved in this, obviously. There was a lot of treason done. So, yeah. But moving on.
Right. So this is also a historic photo from 1918. This is actually one of the founders of the Republic of Armenia. This is Aram Manukyan. His walking is on the right, the shorter man, like on the front of the commanders. That's Aram Manukyan, one of the leaders who actually facilitated the establishment of the Republic of Armenia. And this is, one of the formations that also fought in the heroic battles of Sardarapat, Aparan, etc. Aram Manukyan is considered one of the leaders. The first prime minister of Armenia, we're going to have his photo as well, was Hovannes Kajaznuni. And the government was formed in June of 1918. Unfortunately, Aram Manukyan died in January of 1919 of typhus. Because, as I said, during this time, it was... Republic of Armenia was established. It was a moment of a triumph and glory, but also of great tragedies, because mostly it was the survivors from the Armenian genocide from the Western Armenia and very much disease-stricken population, typhus and other diseases. And Aram Manukyan died. He also caught typhus and died in January of 19.
It's unfortunate. I mean, what a way to go, right? I mean, wow.
Hero and died, but he did everything because he spent so much time with the refugees and the survivors of the genocide. He just, he wasn't like an official in his office. He was very much part. And this is a group photo from 1920s of Garegin Nejde and his comrades. He's the one in the center. Yeah.
Well, I can tell you this much: you can't find this picture online. Because this is
it's a rare one. It is online. I can show it. I can give you.
Well, I mean, I've searched. I don't know how you. Well, obviously, I know how you got it. Yeah, it's a rare one.
Nejde photos that I've searched, I've never seen.
This is actually Nejde in, I believe, 1925 in Iran. So when he actually had to withdraw from Syunik after he was promised that Syunik is an integral part of Armenia, even Soviet Armenia. Then he agreed in summer of 1921. Then he withdrew to Iran. So this is a photo of him with his comrades, his deputies in Iran.
Okay. Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we talk about the Paris Peace Treaty a little bit, and then we'll show the video. I think that would kind of coincide, or
yeah. Well, it's a little bit. After
okay, well,
so maybe a couple more slides and then we'll do the video.
Right. Okay. Well, you gave us all this content, so you guide us. But again, going back to the Paris Peace Conference, why was there two Armenian delegations present?
That's a great question. Yeah. So basically, as I said, during this time, politically, there were, several Armenian political currents, but two major ones. In Eastern Armenia, a very prominent political party was the Armenian Revolutionary Federation, the ARF, known in Armenia as Dashnak Chichun for short. So basically, it was at this time prominent, and basically, as in the army, even in 1917 and even before that, it already occupied an important place in the Armenian National Council. So it automatically became the leaders of the Republic of Armenia in 1918. However, just as important, it was another powerful Armenian political party. It was more like a political movement. It was like a political movement that had its branches, but It began in early 20th century, led by Boros Nubar, who was also a very prominent Armenian leader. Very briefly, basically, he was a son of the prime minister of Egypt, Armenian by extraction, who was a prime minister in Egypt. So, he was respected very much in diplomatic international circles, in Great Britain, in France, in the United States. Boros Nubar was very much respected. And he led the Armenian National Delegation. The Armenian National Delegation began as an organization to protect and defend the rights of Western Armenians in Western Armenia. It was actually established as such by the Armenian Catholicos Georg V, who actually named Boros Nubar as the leader of the Armenian National Delegation. So it even predates the establishment of the Republic of Armenia because it began as early as 1912.
Okay.
Yeah. At that time, it didn't fight for the establishment of united Armenia. It simply wanted to protect the rights of the Western Armenians that were enshrined by the Treaty and Congress of Berlin of 1878.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that a little bit more later on. I don't want to get into that because that's part of the Armenian question. It is kind of related.
Well, we're going to do a special episode about the Armenian question.
Just take way too much time, to give the details. So basically, he rose to prominence during this time, and then obviously in Eastern Armenia, the part in this, Armenia, it was led by the Armenian Revolutionary Federation. So Armenian Revolutionary Federations, but having said that, the Armenian National Delegation also closely cooperated with the Republic of Armenia's government. To their credit, they had strong differences, but they did collaborate. For example, in 1917 already, an offshoot of the Armenian national delegation, which later on politically was more known as the Armenian Liberal Democratic Party, the Ramkavars. The Ramkavar Party in Eastern Armenia established a branch which was known the Armenian Populist or Democratic Party, Հայ-ժողովրդական կուսակցություն. That's was his name. So Հայ-ժողովրդական կուսակցություն, as early as 1918, agreed to form government with the ARF in the Republic of Armenia. So it wasn't just the ARF; it was other political smaller Armenian political parties
but
also.
These were the prominents, they were the prominent
parties. Exactly, there were smaller factions. But the thing is, like, Boros Nubar felt that if his own delegation is not represented, the interests of Western Armenians, which, as I said, he always, defended and, portrayed himself as the defender of those rights, would not be properly defended. So there was this modicum, an understanding with the Republic of Armenia's government that the Armenian National Delegation would also take part. And to their credit, although they had this sort of bipartisan setup of the Armenian National Delegation and the delegation of the Republic of Armenia at the Paris Peace Conference, they formed part of this United Armenia or Integral Armenia delegation. So it was a united delegation, but like bipartisan, sort of like,
branched out too. Branched out.
But it formed, for example, like they had a memorandum which was presented to the Paris Peace Conference stating Armenian claims. For example, we should have a united Armenia, which includes part of Eastern Armenia and Western Armenia. And by Western Armenia, we also include the Black Sea area. We'll see the maps now, and Cilician Armenia. So if you show the maps, I don't know if we're going to have the maps, but I'll talk about briefly. Okay, so this is the coat of arms of the Republic of Armenia that was established in 1918. It was later modified today. If you see the version today, it's a change. But this is the original coat of arms, Some people argue that aesthetically it looks more impressive than the coat of arms we have today. I don't know,
I would argue a little bit, sure, but it looks very British in that last one. But that's just me saying.
Right. And this is the territory of the Republic of Armenia before the peace conference, before the inclusion of Western Armenia. And this is actually a very important map because this is a British map from 1919, okay? Early 1919, before the inclusion of Western Armenia as part of Republic of Armenia, that we see parts of Artsakh up to the territory of Ganzak is included as part of the Republic of Armenia and Nakhichevan. So the British in 1919, they made sure that Nakhichevan, Kars, all these areas that still had very strong resistance to our Republic of Armenia, these rogue elements, these Tatar and Turkish elements, basically there were these Tatar paramilitary forces often led by Turkish officers, Ottoman Turkish officers led these elements. They resisted. They didn't want Nakhichevan and Kars to be part of Armenia. So the British troops actually said, this is Armenia, and they helped the British troops stationed in the Caucasus after the Treaty of Mudros. Remember, we talked about them in the Treaty of, not a treaty, but we talked about William Thompson and others, that there was a strong British presence. They actually drove these bands away. And Artsakh, as we can see, this is a British map published in London, 1919. Not only the so-called Soviet territory that was marked as Artsakh, the NKAO, Nagorno-Karabakh, but adjoining areas that so-called is called like the adjoining regions of Azerbaijan, quote-unquote, occupied. It was part of the Republic of Armenia. This is a British map.
You know, that's funny you bring that up. I'm glad you brought that up because last episode, obviously, and everybody else who watched it, we have, Tom DeWall, the journalist, on our show.
It's going to get interesting.
And first of all, to our audience member, I know a lot of you guys had questions and you guys wanted us to ask him, but we had limited time. There's certain people that we can have him only for a certain amount of time. And the topic was about his book. And there was a moment where we talked about, he was talking about these 7 regions that, and the way he put it was that, outside of the Nagorno-Karabakh, which is the, Stepanakert and some of the parts that the way he put it, and all due respect to Tom, that he didn't feel any more, what was the word he used? Like he didn't care for the Armenians outside of that because that is Azerbaijani land, which I kind of fired back in the nicest possible way. And again, Tom is an important person in the journalistic world. And I respect what he does. But my thing towards him was like, well, these are historically lands. And I think the misconception is that when we say historical lands, it doesn't mean you want to drive out the people who are there. There's many historical lands where you had, other people who have settled there. So what would you say to that, that he said that outside of the Nagorno-Karabakh region, that, his sympathy for the Armenians stops there. Like anything above that, or outside of that is Azerbaijani.
Right. Well, first of all, Thomas DeWall has done important work by just, writing that book, doing the research. Absolutely. Yeah. But, I respectfully disagree with that thesis, because first of all, like, why are you legitimizing illegal decisions made by Stalin? This sort of single-handed decision, who basically, took a pen and drew, these are the borders of Nagorno-Karabakh autonomous region. He just took a pen and drew it, leaving out these Armenian villages, hundreds of Armenian villages of northern Artsakh out of this area. Who's to say that's not part of it? It always has been, for thousands of years, has been populated by Armenians. And we did talk about this in the Artsakh episode that, it was just made, like even the Azeris themselves, so-called Azeris, they said, yes, we don't want trouble with the Armenians. We want to get along. Let's have this part of Armenia. But Stalin said, wait a minute, we have to accommodate Turkey. So let's make a so-called pro-Azeri policy. So Mustafa Kemal is pressuring me saying do some decisions that favor the Azeris, so I have to do this to strengthen the Soviet-Turkish alliance against the West, by the way. Why are we honoring these decisions, these illegal decisions made not even by not even like the Communist Party, but a single sort of like dictatorially minded person who made these illegal decisions? I mean, for example, Western powers don't recognize the annexation, for example, of the Baltic states by Stalin, right?
Yeah.
They consider that trampling upon international law. Then why are you recognizing and enforcing the occupation and illegal annexation of parts of the Republic of Armenia?
Great point.
Why do you have this double standard? Why in the Baltic states that's an occupation, but when the Bolsheviks and Stalin did that, because Stalin even back then in 1920, 21, he was already a powerful Bolshevik leader, head of the commissars for the nationalities. Okay, he was a powerful leader, and he made that decision, single-handed decision back in 1921. And I already stated why he made that decision, to accommodate Mustafa Kemal, who he viewed as his ally against the West. I mean, that's a classic trampling upon international law. We'll talk about the illegal invasion, occupation, and partition of the Republic of Armenia.
It's funny you say that. Do you see the history repeating itself?
Well, of course. Are you kidding me?
I mean, this is, Russia holding the hand of Aliyev, Turkey.
Well, it's more Turkey and Russia.
Yeah.
And then Azeris are, again, so-called Azeris. Aliyev is just a tool in my
I love how he
assessment.
said so-called Azeris.
I mean, but they are.
But they are.
I know.
Because we talked about this. The real Azeris,
state.
The real Azeris, the Azaris, these people live south of the Arax River. They're like, those are the people, and it's called actually Azari in Iranian. That's an Iranian ancient province. This territory has never been part of Azerbaijan.
And they're trying, and we've talked about this.
Yeah.
They're trying to stake claim to it because
exactly.
of the name. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I mean, again, we had a comment that Baku is Bakurakert. Well, I mean, I don't know if we want to go that far.
No, I mean, that definitely it's not part of Azerbaijan, but I wouldn't call it Armenia. Let's just put it that way.
It's not.
We had ancient Albania. Later on, it was known as Shirvan. They were allied.
But there was Armenian kings there, right? Isn't there part?
Well, kind of, but we had periods that we also occupied that territory, but historically, Armenia extended to the Caspian Sea through the Kura and Araxes River, which is the last province, is Paitakaran, which is kind of south of the Absheron Peninsula, Baku.
And that's it. That's where the border stops.
That's it.
Okay. All right. So to those of you who claim, listen, we have to be fair about this situation.
We have to be
as accurate as possible. Yeah.
Historically accurate facts. And history is on, the truth. That's
because when you have conversations, sorry, Mike, and I want to point this out, we have a lot of audience members and people that in our circle of friends that we talk about, Baku was built by Armenians, this, maybe some architects helped and this and that. But again, that border is so important. Right. We cannot claim lands that were not ours, because then you're doing what they're doing.
What they're doing, exactly.
So be careful with that, guys. Exactly. There's no need for us to claim.
Besides that, don't forget that this is an area that had an occupation of many, many types of tribes and individuals from different nationalities and different heritages. We can't stake claim to every single piece of territory.
Absolutely. No, that's
it's really pun intended.
The only people that can claim, and the Azeris are now even like exterminating and assimilating them, are the Lezgins, are the Avars. These are the descendants of the Caucasian Albanians. They're our natural allies. Unfortunately, most of them are on the verge of being exterminated by the Aliyev regime, by this pan-Turkist ideology. They're being Turkified.
Those of you who are asking questions more about current situation, guys, we'll get to that hopefully at the end of the show. Like I said, right now we're covering the First Republic of Armenia, and I know we kind of get sidetracked here and there, which is fine, but I want to concentrate on this.
Speaking of this time period, I have a really interesting question. What was the political climate of the people, the overall climate during this time in Armenia?
Right.
What
Well,
was it like with the people? Let's say, what were they asking for? What were they yearning for?
right. Well, to be honest, the worst position that the Armenian population in the Republic of Armenia faced were the survivors of the Armenian genocide. And if you can just imagine, hundreds of thousands of these survivors had poured in after 1915 into Armenia, and then they were the most vulnerable population. So there was a lot of malnutrition, a lot of starvation, a lot of disease. And even the survivors, we were losing hundreds of survivors, these orphans, little children, by the hundreds every day in the Republic of Armenia as soon as it was established. And it was thanks to mainly, I mean, other charities as well, but to the Near East Relief and President Wilson's administration, these Herculean efforts, the Near East Relief, obviously the American missionaries that we talked about, they were very much involved in the Near East Relief. They were doing most of the work. They were also collecting most of the funds back in the United States. Throughout all the 50 states had like chapters. All the 50 states, like all the schools, kindergartens, colleges, everyone was collecting our money to help to the survivors of the Armenian genocide. So coming back to that, it was not a happy time, Mike, unfortunately.
Of course it wasn't a happy time.
It was, for many Armenians, it was a time of to be proud of their, reestablishment of this important milestone. But we were faced with so much, issues. This mainly
your entire race almost got wiped
exactly.
out. So
and those that survived, they were in danger also of starvation and disease.
The orphans and
plus
psychologically.
Plus, even after the defeat, constantly the Turks and the Tatars were attacking us. Constantly, they wanted to make
continued
Armenian experience hell. Just basically, they were constant these reports. If you look at the archival evidence, which I have, constantly pouring in American and.
Can I ask you something? When you say the Turks and the Tatars, was it the government or was it these renegade groups that were just just I don't know, just had no human, they didn't care about human life, whatever. They just hated Armenians. They were just, so that's what I want to understand. Was it the governments or their whatever so-called?
Right. Well, the pan-Turkist ideology, even by this time, even so-called formally Turkey was defeated, it never went away. And as I talked about, the pan-Turkist ideology, the Turks wanted to create a vast empire, Turkic empire.
When you say the Turks, you're talking about the government or was it a mindset of the people? Because there's this constant argument.
Very strong elements within the Turkish government, the so-called Young Turk movement. People like Enver Pasha, who was one of the three Pashas. He was the main proponent of the pan-Turkist ideology, and he remained so until he was basically eliminated by an Armenian hero serving in the Russian army.
Okay.
Melkumov, that was his name. Jakob Melkumov or Melkumian. In 1922 in Central Asia, when this Enver Pasha was trying to organize local Turkics against Russia, to dismember Russia, even Soviet Russia. This was part of his pan-Turkist drive. Basically, what we saw earlier, Vic, that was the passport of the Republic of Armenia with the nice sort of writing Hayastani Hanrapetutyun. And then this is the flag, one of the surviving flags from the period, the red, blue, and gold.
Can we talk about the flag for a little bit?
Sure.
I know that for a fact that originally, and AGBU has these colors as well, and Boris Nubar was one of the founders of AGBU, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And the flag originally was supposed to be red, blue, and white.
Yes.
Why
blue, white, and red.
Oh, sorry. Blue, white, and red.
I
had backwards. Yeah. Blue, white, and red. Yeah. That was the original flag of Armenia.
Yeah.
Why did they go with this? Because I feel like this orange clashes so bad with. I've never been a fan of that color being in our flag.
Right.
And I know there's been also a lot of debate, and when we got our independence again, there was this debate back and forth.
Right. Well, absolutely. The same thing happened in 1918 when they were adopting the flag of the Republic of Armenia. There were different proponents of different colors. So this is actually one of the proponents were, and actually Pohos, Nubar, and others, especially the circle of the Armenian national delegation, they argue for the blue, white, and red flag. And they stated that reflected more our heritage, because the Bagratunis, the Arshakunis, and others used either blue or red, and white was kind of this neutral color that brought it together, right?
It's almost like the backdrop.
Backdrop, exactly. And incidentally, all those three colors, along with gold, is also present on our last coat of arms of Cilician Armenia, which was the last kingdom of Armenia. It's also present. But the proponents of these colors sort of won out in the parliament of the Republic of Armenia. And initially, there were actually proponents of red, blue, and gold or yellow. But then, according to Simon Varatsian, who was the last prime minister of the Republic of Armenia, who wrote his memoir, Hayastani Hanrapetutun, in 1928, for the 10th anniversary of the Republic of Armenia, he actually states that it was actually Khajazluni, Hovannes Khajazluni, the first prime minister of the Republic of Armenia, who argued in favor of the color orange. He argued that aesthetically, it's actually better than to have gold and yellow, or even have the original blue, white, and red. But incidentally, as you rightly pointed out, the AGBU, as the successor of the once Armenian national delegation, still carries the blue, white, and red flag.
Beautiful.
And actually, Nubar stated that it should be the flag of united Armenia. Once the Paris Peace Conference is over, it should be the official flag of the United State of Armenia. Blue, white, and red. And actually, several
United States of Armenia.
Yeah.
Well, United Armenia.
United Armenia.
Well, I mean, we've already talked about the United Kingdom of Armenia in the 11th century.
But you see why united, right? Because it brought together two portions.
The provinces.
Exactly.
All the
And, they made a very clear argument that, Armenia was artificially divided by foreign invaders. Armenia is integral. Armenia is one. The Armenian people are one.
Yeah.
No.
It's always been the case.
It's always been the case. Even our literary language, why did we develop Western Armenian and Eastern Armenian? Because Armenia was divided, and a part of Armenian intelligentsia was in Constantinople under the Ottomans. Another part of Armenia was in Tiflis, in parts of Russian control areas. So even that was as a result of foreign domination. If there was a single Armenia, we would have, like at the time of Mashtots and others, we had single Garapar, right? Single literary Armenia. We wouldn't have two.
But here's my question to something like that. When you're going on an international level to have these kind of talks in terms of who's going to get what type of territory, by the numbers we can make an argument, but is that strong enough of an argument on an international level to be able to, let's say, get certain types of lands, right? Like, and it might be a stupid question, but like, I don't know, maybe you would know better. I certainly don't. But on a level like this, where you're handing off lands to certain factions, to certain people, or making arguments for this, is that powerful enough of an argument,
right,
to these allies or states of heads of state, that are overseeing these arguments?
Well, that's a good question, Mike. Actually, it's not a stupid question. It's a very good question. But the thing is, the Allies were actually sympathetic to our Armenian side, because they actually said that Armenia, as a viable state, starting with President Wilson first and foremost, as a viable state, if it's going to be a viable state, a strong state, a prosperous state, it needs access to the sea, and not only just one sea, but two seas. Because, for example, Black Sea, it's a Black Sea basin, right?
Yes.
You can't. get there and get into international waters as the Mediterranean is. It's like closed up because the Turks, for example, if they control the straits of the Dardanelles, the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles, they would just simply close that area and you would be locked in, right?
I mean, which is the case now.
Which is the case now, right? They control that part. That's why even back then, the Allies said they shouldn't control the straits of Bosphorus. It should be a neutral zone at best. It shouldn't be part of Turkish controlled. And they were right because that's like they can always blackmail and use that against certain actions.
They box you in.
Yeah.
So the Mediterranean was actually a sea that had access to other oceans and other seas. So Armenia had to have access to the Black and Mediterranean seas. And this was actually proposed, we'll see the maps just a little bit later, by the Americans, by the British and the Allies. So they were on board. They actually supported United Armenia from sea to sea. That was official of British and American policy. We just saw a poster or postcard of Armenia after its establishment in 1918. It's just a historic postcard. These are men of the Armenian Armed Forces from that period, officers.
You want to mention his comment? I want your... Well, first of all, I want to thank Khachatur for joining us. It's his first time. Thank you.
Appreciate it,
give
brother.
us a like and follow us and share with your family and friends. But yeah, you want to ask California Dreamin'?
Yeah. Go ahead and post that really quick.
Yeah.
So California Dreamin' is saying the First Republic Armenian government initially had no plans to becoming independent. They wanted to join Russia. But since both Georgia and Azerbaijan declared independence, Armenia had no choice.
What do you say to that?
Well, there's certain truth to that, but I wouldn't say Armenia had no choice to say that. This is an important to differentiate, okay? Georgia and Azerbaijan, that they didn't declare independence on their own. Georgia was sort of like a proxy of Germany. Okay. So the main sponsor of Georgian independence was actually Germany, and the main sponsor of so-called Azeri independence was Turkey.
Yeah.
Only
who were allies with.
Exactly, who are their allies. Only Armenians fought as allies against the Ottomans, against the Central Powers in the battles of Sardarabad, Aparan, and Vanadzor. Okay, so that's a false premise that that independence was just given to us and we weren't ready for it. No, I'm sorry, I don't buy that.
But now I have a follow-up question, and this is kind of phasing away from Armenian history. It might be a world history question. Germany was crippled after World War One.
After World War One, but we're talking about Mike. We're talking about mid 1918, right? This is before Germany's defeat.
Before the defeat.
This is before Germany's defeat. This is mid 1918.
Okay.
Germany was defeated and acknowledged its defeat on November 11, 1918.
Yes.
Okay, and that's considered the end of World War One, right?
So they still
11 days before that, 12 days.
Sort of clout to say they had some sort of voice in determining certain things.
Absolutely. Okay. And believe it or not, they weren't always seeing eye to eye with their so-called ally Turkey on the question of Armenia.
Well,
for example, the Germans were saying, okay, you signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, you should honor that. You're pushing too much.
Yeah.
You're pushing your own pan-Turkist agenda, which clashes with our own plans. They allies among themselves, Germany and Turks, they had issues, okay, and so they didn't see eye to eye.
It almost felt like they were pulling skin apart for their own good.
Right. We're just seeing some important. I mean, that was Oliver Baldwin, he was son of later Prime Minister of Britain, in uniform of Armenian officers with shoulder bolts, Hayastani Hanrapetutun. It's historic. Uniform of Armenia, and Oliver Baldwin was an important pro-Armenian British leader. Great, outstanding man. That was actually Herian, Captain Herian. Before that, he fought in the Armenian Legion, which, remember, we talked about Armenian volunteers in the French army. They formed the Legion. These are, again, men of the Legion. Just a sample photo. Yeah.
Okay. And
men of the Legion who later on from the United States, American Armenian volunteers of the French Legion, Armenian Legion of the French Army.
Okay.
from Boston. This is a picnic later on, a get together in 1922, the veterans. It actually says it, I believe, 1922.
Yeah, it says it on there,
Okay.
1922.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting.
And again, this is some of the men of the Legion that part of the French Legion and other allied formations. And believe it or not, in the center, that's Sepu, General Sepu, who was also at one point deputy of Andranik.
The one in the suit?
In the suit, yeah.
Okay.
He's an important military Armenian figure.
Okay.
General Sepu, who later, at the end of his life, lived in United States.
And
this is the Armenian Legion flag of the French army. It's actually in the War Museum in Paris, like a French War Museum.
Really?
This piece.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And this is the telegram by President Woodrow Wilson to Armenian American leaders, Azatian, Kulakian, and others, that, I fully support the creation of independent Armenia, and it's going to be, obviously United Armenia in the Paris Peace Conference. This
Wow.
is
Crazy.
that's a telegram. Yeah. And the descendant of
That's insane.
Yeah, you're not going to see this anywhere else, guys.
Yeah. This is archival.
This is special. Yes.
Again, see, this resolution was adopted in the Senate, that's saying Armenia should be united from sea to sea, and it says what territory it should encompass. Do you see Cilicia and Trapezant?
Yeah.
Trapezant basically access to the Black Sea, Cilicia access to the Mediterranean Sea, and Eastern Armenia as well. This resolution was adopted in 1918 in the Senate of the United States.
Yeah.
Those would be the boundaries of the united Armenia.
Now, Geb, I know you said, and I'm sorry to sound repetitive, but I'm sure some of the audience members might want to know, is some of these documents, they are archived in Armenia. They are not public information.
Yes, I mean specifically
no.
this is also this is public domain. So
Okay.
this for example is not part of a I have such documents which are like haven't even been digitized. I've digitized them myself,
Yeah.
But this specifically, it's part of the Senate and Congress archive. So it's readily available. I mean,
To everybody's joining us, thank you guys. Do me a favor, hit that thumbs up button. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, thank you so much. Please share this with your friends and family or whoever's up. Have them join us. Watch this. This is so important. You guys have no idea what type of information we're presenting. You're not going to get this anywhere else. This man is a treasure trove, and we are lucky to have him here. And also, again, I will keep pushing the promotion that we have. You guys, we want everybody who's local in the LA area to join us at the Mer Talk event, exploring the cradle of Armenia, cradle of a civilization, I should say, which is Armenia.
This guy talk.
Not just that. When you guys come to this event, we are gonna take you back to where it all began. There's gonna be amazing slides, Armenian highlands. We're gonna cover some amazing topics. Bring your family members, bring your kids who are old enough to understand this. I'm seeing only 2 scans. Go ahead, guys, scan that, get your ticket, join us. It's a Thursday night, March 30th at 8 p.m. We have a social hour at 7. We're going to have some surprises for everybody. It's going to be a great panel talk. So go ahead and do that right now. All right, so moving on. Do you want to keep going with should I go to the next question, or you want to go with the slides? What do you...
Let's cover this. This is part of what we talked about. So
Yeah.
this is actually again rare photo. We see Boghos Nubar on the left, and on the right Avetis Aharonyan, the leader of the Armenian delegation of the Republic of Armenia. So these are the 2 men that led the United Armenia delegation to the Paris Peace Conference.
Okay.
And
Unbelievable.
yeah, this is just another photo of Boghos Nubar and Avetis Aharonyan again in Paris.
And we talked about, we're going to do a special episode on Boghos Nubar.
Yes.
He's such an important person
should.
that a lot
We
of people
should.
don't know about. And we've had people who have reached out to us asking
And
us to do
actually
it.
mentioned it.
We will do that, guys. Just all in good time. We have so much content to present to you guys. We will get there hopefully sooner than later. But, time.
And here is a map from 1919. This is an American map. As you can see, already the borders of United Armenia are outlined, including access to the Black and the Mediterranean Sea. Do you see the territory? We'll have more maps. This is just one. I mean, the maps of the period from 1919 and 1920, they feature these all territories of Armenia as, covering this territory.
Gebor, again, these were proposed maps, or they were maps by certain delegations that
that's a great question. So in 1919, a wider territory of Armenia was proposed. Eventually that shrank to territory, as we know, which is the arbitrary award of President Woodrow Wilson that we will talk about. Yeah. So, but this was proposed, and eventually, this is the proposal.
There you go.
Do you see the axis black north and the
Mediterranean? Just get this back.
You got to manage a lot of Kurds.
Jeez.
Okay, here's just another map of United Armenia, C2C. Again, these are all British, American, European maps of the period, showing this territory.
Yeah, and it was such a time of turmoil in terms of the map restructuring.
I mean, look
at
that map.
Right?
And this map, this was actually prepared by the Foreign Office of Great Britain and submitted to the Paris Peace Conference as the British proposal for the reestablishment of the state of Armenia. And this was a important map. And on the left, you see Herbert Hoover, who later on became the president in the 20s of the 30s of the United States. He was actually at this time head of the American Relief Administration in Europe, and you see the same map, United Armenia, on his wall. So he was also proponent, of the Armenian cause, of the reestablishment of Armenian independence, of United Armenia, and he actually posted it on his office.
Okay, Scottsdale tours. We'll get to that question, and you'll understand why we are showing this. So, and you know what? I'll bring up his comment.
Okay.
We'll wrap this up with his, hopefully. But his is, this is all good history. What good is it today? Armenia today is giving away Artsakh. Armenia today is doing nothing to fight for our history. Looking at the history only boils my blood. And it should boil your blood. But we'll wrap it up why we do this.
Sure.
Yeah.
But thank you for the comment.
I'll take a snapshot of that, and then we'll get it.
You want me to cover this now or no?
Later. At the end.
Afterwards.
Okay, sure.
What is the point of
afterwards.
this?
Okay,
What is the
okay.
point of this? So, yeah.
Screen grab.
Okay, so moving on again, more maps here.
Okay, as we can see, I actually have the physical map. I'm the, lucky owner of this map. I have the original map with me, the physical.
Let me
if you
take
show
this
it.
off the screen. Give me 1 second. So that digital version you guys saw, this is right here, their original map that you guys see. This is this is worth more than, like I said, all the equipment we have sitting on this table. So, but
Right.
you actually brought that with you.
Yes, I
Going
did.
back and putting it on the screen so you guys can see it.
Yeah. Again, this is an American map. So, as I said, these boundaries were proposed by the British, by the Americans at the Paris Peace Conference, and the reason they actually proposed this, because they knew that a powerful Armenia allied with, Britain, with United States, was also an asset for them. And what Woodrow Wilson said, and actually history came to, affirm what he actually said. He said, only a viable and strong Armenia is in interest of the United States.
Yeah.
If Turkey would remain strong and powerful, eventually it would just go back to its militarist Ottoman heritage, and it would reemerge once again in a militaristic fashion. And guess what? History proved him right. He was right. He said if Turkey remains in such a state, it would always draw upon this militarist, aggressive tradition, and would eventually be a problem not only for the West, but for all of the region, but for the West first and foremost. And he was right. He said, Turkey cannot be an ally of the United States. I mean, it's just impossible. And there were some that argued, wait a minute, no, it can happen, it can work out, But look, I mean, Turkey never adopted, for example, the values of democracy in a true sense. It was never a democracy even in the 20th century.
Yeah.
Under Mustafa Kemal, it was a dictatorial power of a single party state. Those that followed him were military men. They did the same. There was like sham elections.
Yeah.
Then they had these military coups that constantly were happening in Turkey. Military juntas ruled Turkey, and now you have the Islamist government. They reverted more to the Ottoman period, which they called Neo-Ottoman heritage period. Neo-Ottoman policies. So he was right. And here's just a poster of, remember I talked about the Republic of Armenia, the ARF, and the national delegation, the Ramgavars, the two major forces. Here's a poster that united Armenia, brought these two Armenian major factions, Western Armenians, Eastern Armenians, ARF, the national delegation together. This is a commemorative poster of that.
Wow.
With some of the important leaders of the United Armenia delegation. In 1919, on May 28, the Republic of Armenia proclaimed the union of Eastern and Western Armenia as United Armenia.
Yeah.
From henceforth, they said we should never talk about Western or Eastern Armenia as such. That just divides us.
One.
There's one Armenia. There's one United Armenia.
Yeah.
This is that parade in honor
it shouldn't
of that,
even
in
be.
Yerevan.
I don't think it should even be called United Armenia. It should just be Armenia.
Armenia, exactly.
Yeah,
because I
absolutely.
said we were divided artificially by foreign invaders.
Yeah.
Why are you fitting into that narrative?
Yeah.
And this was like a triumphal arch that was also built on that day, May 28, first anniversary of the establishment of the Republic of Armenia, which proclaimed the union of Eastern and Western Armenia as one.
Yeah.
Integral Armenia. And actually there was a Armenian-American architect, a graduate of Columbia University, Tagakcan, that was his last name. He actually proposed to have this as the seat of parliament of the new building for United Armenia. As you can see, to a great extent, it looks like the Capitol Hill.
Yeah, literally.
Exactly.
Interesting. Wow.
Because Armenia's number one ally would be the United States.
Yeah.
And, obviously it would actually reflect that also. So, and he was a graduate of Columbia University.
Imagine if there was another dimension where all this stuff actually came true. I wonder what it would look
well,
like.
For sure, I would say, definitely, even for United States, the policies throughout even greater Middle East, it would be easier. Some can maybe argue against that, but, I firmly believe that. Not just as, for example, Armenian, but, I mean, because what Wilson was saying, he was right. Like an alliance with Turkey would later be very problematic because the values that supposedly are shared are not in reality shared by the two nations. Democracy, human rights, etc. And if we look today, like I said, history proved them out. Look at Erdogan. Look at what Erdogan is doing. He just reverted totally to the Ottoman period.
Yeah,
He's like hardcore Islamic, fundamental. Yeah.
I mean, his days are counted. So,
those were scouts who were also like with a poster saying United Armenia, Free United Armenia. And here are the delegates to the United States of United Armenia, encompassing members of the national delegation in the Republic of Armenia. They actually joined together as the delegation of United Armenia, and they came in 1919, end of 1919, October, November, to the United States. This was a group photo of them. You see Andranik, Kajaznuni, Armen Garo, who was the first Armenian ambassador to the United States in the back, and other prominent, Hagop Bagratuni, prominent Armenian general who also became later the Armenian ambassador to Great Britain. Top ministers of our
great photo.
Yeah,
it is.
It looks like sharp it looks for that time period, right?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a studio photo. Yeah, and this is actually, as you see, this is in the United States.
Look
on
at
the
those flags.
East Coast. Yeah, you see Andranik seated in the center. This is 1919 when he came in November or December.
Right here. Yeah, there he is.
Exactly. With the Armenian flag.
He's right. I know it's a little bit washed, but if you guys can pay attention to next to the lady, between the lady and the gentleman, that's right there. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I mean, I've never seen these photos. This is amazing. Thank you for bringing this along.
This is actually Armenian American veterans who served in the American Armed Forces. They paraded in April of 1920, right before the recognition of the Republic of Armenia by the United States. This is in Washington, D.C. on Capitol Hill.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
This is again Capitol Hill Armenian American volunteers. All of them are Armenian American volunteers who served in the American Army in World War I, in the European theater and different other theaters.
Are you guys seeing this? This is incredible.
That's crazy.
It's like time traveling back, and I mean things that we never knew about. Did you know about this? No. Did any of you guys know about this?
There were delegations and movements and groups and whatnot that were doing these
right,
things.
It's fascinating.
Back then.
Yeah.
Congress building. This is a close up of the same photo. Just if you see some of the faces.
Yeah. There's all those young Armenian men.
Yeah.
With their Armenian
sailors, Marines, just servicemen,
Armenian
men.
blood boiling in there.
Again, like sailors, Marines, officers.
Yeah. Those of you who will be listening to our podcast later on, I suggest you guys come and watch it on YouTube. You're going to really
a little bit of eye candy.
See what we're showing.
And here is Bainbridge Colby, the Secretary of State, handing Armenian American Hagop Kazanchan, an officer, handing him a signed paper that says the United States recognizes the Republic of Armenia, which happened on April 23, 1920. Bainbridge Colby, Secretary of State.
Wow.
In the State Department. Again, historic photo.
I want to, I know a lot of you guys are from the East Coast. Thank you for sticking around. We're past 2 hours. This is going to be a long one, guys. So, No, we have to cover this. Yeah. So those of you who might not be able to stick around, we appreciate it, but we're going to keep going. We still have more questions for Georg, and I want to get to that video. I want people to see this. So we'll get to that soon.
That was the seal impression of the Armenian delegation. At the League of Nations, which is the legal predecessor of the United Nations.
Yeah.
So we even had our legal representation in the League of Nations, Republic of Armenia.
Okay.
And here's another map of proposed Armenia. As you can see, already by 1920, there were arguments being made that, Armenia should not include that much territory, but should include a little bit less, unfortunately, because some were making the argument, Armenians have lost so many people that they wouldn't be able to control that area.
Yeah.
Like you talked about the Kurds and others, but that was a faulty, to be honest. I don't want to get into that too much.
Ara Papian mentioned that.
Yeah, that's a faulty argument. Yeah. That's a faulty argument because, but and this is a good map to show what we initially was proposed by the Americans, British, and the Armenian delegations, and what eventually was recognized through the arbitral award of President Woodrow Wilson as the international boundary of the Republic of Armenia with that red line.
You see,
so about half was left out, like Cilicia was left out, Lesser Armenia, all of that territory, by the way, that's just Lesser Armenia in the north and Cilician Armenia.
I mean, historically,
It's not like Armenians were asking for non-Armenian populated areas.
Beyond that, first thing that caught my attention was the northern part along the Black Sea. You have now what could have established port cities.
Exactly.
For trade, and again, I know this might open up a different can of worms. We're not going to get into that, but imagine the possibilities in terms of trade.
Oh yeah,
Economy from over 100 years ago. I mean, look at that major portion of the Black Sea.
Well, actually, the American delegation, known as the American Commission to Negotiate Peace, they were making these very important arguments that you're saying, that they were outlining Armenia needs this, ports.
Yes.
And they were even saying some have, for example, shallow, some are rocky, so they can't be used as proper good ports. You know, like the ports on the Mediterranean have this warm water outlet, so you need this. There's Ellen Semple and others, very important people that formulated all of these documents and outlined all of it. So this is what the Armenians saying. It was Americans, the British saying it. And as you can see, already by 1920, the Manchester Guardian, which is one of the leading British newspapers of the time, it said that in the San Remo Conference, which was basically as part of the greater Paris Peace Conference, in April of 1920, already decided that 4 provinces of Western Armenia were part of the Republic of Armenia. So kind of they narrowed down this United Armenia territory, unfortunately leaving Cilicia out of the state of Armenia, but at least the 4 provinces were definitely to be part of Armenia. This was the provinces of Van, Bitlis, Erzurum, and Trebizond. Most of the territory of those provinces. Wow. Not all of them. And this is the Manchester Guardian. And here's the arbitral award map made in the State Department. This was actually made in the State Department by specialists led by William Westerman, who was the head of the commission that outlined this map, considering various factors, mostly like natural frontiers and other. But as you can see, it included most of the territory. This is the western frontier of the Republic of Armenia with Turkey, and this is internationally recognized boundary because it was made as an arbitral award. And I know Arap Apian obviously talked a lot about the importance of that. Once it's set according to the Geneva Convention and other conventions, that's it. It's set because it's an arbitral award. And even before that, Turkey had already agreed that once the arbitral award is made, it's final without revision. That's it. It's set. That's it. The boundary has been established. Exactly. It's the nature of the award, arbitral award. It was agreed upon earlier. And a process that, as I said, began as early as 1919, culminated in 1920. Yeah. This is, again, the Manchester Guardian already outlining that this is the new frontier between Armenia.
So they were getting ahead of the news at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. This was like front page news at the time that, these are the boundaries of the Republic of Armenia. And this was made according to the decision.
Oh, the news was different back then.
I mean, it was, but I mean, this is everybody kind of gathering bits and pieces of information that was coming out at the time, and then putting it out there because they were trying to get ahead of it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, this is just a map from the period showing the boundaries of the Republic of Armenia with already the set boundaries. Do you see like Republic of Armenia with the 4 provinces of Western Armenia along with Eastern Armenia, and it has nothing to do with Turkey. This was already set. International maps were being published that these are the boundaries of the Republic of Armenia. This is not just a proposal. This is final decision.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
This is final. This is, again, showing map of between Armenia. It says Armenia, right? And
Kurdistan.
Then Turkey.
Yeah.
Kurdistan was according to the decision, it was an autonomous area within Turkey.
Yeah.
But Armenia was fully granted independence, and part of the Republic of Armenia had nothing to do with Turkey.
Yeah. And I understand the frustration of Scottsdale Tours. I don't know what your name is, but seeing all these and what could have been.
I mean, we share the frustration.
Yeah, we share it with everybody.
Believe
but
me.
again,
we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the Bolshevik and Kemalist collaboration. That is what led to the downfall of the republic. So if you have somebody to blame those that brought this about, mainly Lenin, Bolsheviks, who supplied the Turks, the Kemalists, with arms, gold, and everything necessary to destroy Armenian independence and occupy Armenia.
Yeah.
Again, this is the National Geographic map of the National Geographic from 1921. 1921. So this is even after the Bolsheviks had occupied Armenia. But it doesn't matter. In the United States, throughout the 20s, 30s, even 40s, these maps were being published of the borders, genuine and true borders, international borders of the Republic of Armenia, with the 4 provinces of Western Armenia included.
Yeah. To those of you, and I get it's easier to be a pessimist, and I really don't. I don't say I don't like that, but I really look down upon people who just. It's easy to be pessimist, guys. You gotta have hope. Things will change. Things will come if we unite. The point of this is, why are we doing this? We want to educate everybody who might not know about this stuff as Armenians, and it doesn't matter if you're quarter Armenian, half Armenian, full Armenian, Western Berutahai,
or have an Armenian friend,
Persian Armenian, whatever. The point, and why do we do it in English? So later on, non-Armenians watch this, share it with you non-Armenians to learn about the truth of what happened, because this is what's going to eventually help us to move our this movement of hopefully one day setting things right.
Exactly.
And it doesn't matter if it takes 50 years. It doesn't matter if we don't get to see it. Maybe our kids will see it. Maybe our grandchildren will see it. But you can't just be pessimist and go, oh, well, it's never going to happen. Oh, this, oh, that. If you're going to live your life like that, then I feel sorry for you. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Well, beyond that, there's also, as we've mentioned many, many times before, I know you're a big proponent of this too, Gev, is the falsification of our history.
Yeah.
Right? So here, we're documenting it.
There you go. And this is you're talking about 20th century. What we're going to do at the event, we're going to document going back 6,000 years or even more. More. So again, I really want our brothers and sisters to become optimists. Stop with the negativity.
And a part of it is arming yourself with knowledge.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Again, we took on this journey. We didn't know anything,
We have to start by, first of all, talking about this, clarifying things, getting the word out.
Yeah.
As
tell our story.
As the Bible says, in the beginning was the Word.
Yeah.
You have to, first of all, talk about this. Even talking about it, it's very powerful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to be, in a sense, we have to, first of all, inform the people, everyone, Armenians, non-Armenians, whatever.
Yeah.
We have to speak these truths.
Yeah.
Then we can initiate action. Then we can initiate right action. Yeah. You have to be informed so you can make informed decisions and take informed steps.
Yeah.
If you're misinformed, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah. Again, we're looking at pictures of the Armenian volunteer cavalry.
Exactly. This is the first image was actually leaders of the First Republic, Hamazas Bohajanyan, the prime minister when the arbitrary award was made. This is the cabinet during this time, and showing part of the Republic of Armenia border with the already arbitral award of President Woodrow Wilson from 1920. And here, Vic, we actually, the next photo, we actually see the Armenian cavalry. So when the arbitral award was made, I want to talk very briefly. Obviously, Lenin was not happy. Mustafa Kemal, who emerged as the so-called nationalist leader of Turkey, but he had the backing of the sort of like Turkish deep state. So he was very much not just by hap chance, somebody that just came out of nowhere, Secretly, he was backed by the Ottoman, like even people close to the Sultan. Sultan had remained at that time. So he was backed. He had a lot of sympathizers throughout, especially the army. So he didn't just come out of nowhere. So these revanchist Turkish, young Turk forces that hated Armenia, that were against Armenian independence, that pursued pan-Turkish policies, pursued Turkish hardcore nationalist policies, they basically supported Mustafa Kemal, and he emerged as this so-called nationalist leader of Turkey. He also, the Young Turks were also closely at this time collaborating with the Bolsheviks. They had many liaison with the Bolsheviks. So they facilitated this alliance, Bolshevik Kemalist alliance. And at this time, neither the Bolshevik government of Lenin nor Mustafa Kemal were recognized as internationally recognized legal leaders of their nations. They were not recognized. They were rogue. They were movement. They were rogue leaders. Important British leaders like Lord Curzon and others who became the foreign secretary of Great Britain. He was simply calling Kemal, for example, a bandit. He was just a bandit operating out of but Kemal basically, he used the Bolsheviks. He used Lenin. Lenin agreed that, okay, we have like common foes in terms of allies, Great Britain, others. So I'm going to support you against Armenia, against the states, against not only Armenia, he also supported him against Greece, because on the western front for Turkey, eastern portions of Asia Minor and central portions of Asia Minor, they were fighting against the Greeks. So basically, they attacked in September of 1920, the late September, the Mustafa Kemal attacked Republic of Armenia with the Bolshevik support, and the Bolsheviks attacked on the eastern side. So it was like a pincer movement, and they had already agreed to occupy and partition Armenia in their own spheres of influence, but it was an illegal attack, partition, occupation, and partition of Armenia. And they installed this puppet Soviet government in December of 1920, which was never recognized by the Allies, by the United States. And this is actually a map over Near East relief from 1921. If you look closer, it actually says even territory of Armenia occupied by the Kemalists and occupied by the Bolsheviks, showing the boundaries established by President Woodrow Wilson. The caption is there. It's highlighted in yellow. I don't know if you can zoom.
I can't zoom, but I can see the screen. Yeah.
It's important.
It says portion of Armenia controlled by
Soviets. Do you see? It's more like checkered, and with the lines.
Founded by President Wilson.
Wilson. Yeah, Wilson.
Boundary of territory of whatever.
Armenia.
Of Armenia, yeah.
I mean, this is important because it shows that this illegal invasion, attack, occupation, and partition of Armenia was never recognized by the United States, by other European powers, never, ever. And we'll talk about more if
you want to talk about the liberation of Kars and Nakhichevan.
Okay, I did talk about that. Remember, I said the British helped. For that. That's that. That happened in 1919. Vic.
Yeah. Okay. I'm losing track of our questions here. We're going through so much information. Okay. So what are we looking at here? It will be noted that the line of boundary. This is that. There we go. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Okay. So as you can see, I don't want to read it. Obviously, it's on the screen. So it's like President Wilson included territory well outside the Bolshevik claim and now controlled by Mustafa Kemal. Do you see? It clearly states that these are the international. This is from 1921 after invasion and occupation of Armenia.
Yeah. Interesting. All right.
Well, this is just a passport of the Republic of Armenia. I wanted to include it. It's really impressive. And by the way, this was issued in 1922 in Washington, D.C. by the Embassy of the Republic of Armenia. That is to say, as you can see, the Republic of Armenia continued to be recognized by the United States and issued these passports of the Republic. They never recognized the Soviet puppet.
This is the seal.
And this is the seal. Yeah.
And
it says Washington. Do you see in Armenian Washington?
Yeah.
Amazing.
And here, this is a map from the 1925.
Another different map.
Different map. It continued to show the borders established by President Wilson as the true borders of united, free, and independent Republic of Armenia. 1925.
Yeah.
When, the Soviets and the Kemalists had already occupied and partitioned. And the maps from 1930s are the same. They just continue to show these boundaries, 1930s, 40s.
Gamer K, the passion that Gevorka has, that comes from the truth, because the man knows the truth about our history and everything that happened. That's where the passion comes. If you know the truth, you speak with passion because you want the world to know what really took place. And our goal is to go through the cluster that what it is now and bring the truth out.
Absolutely.
And eventually we will.
Now, looking at all these maps and these proposed maps, because looking at it in hindsight, because they were proposed maps, because eventually they settled on something, right?
Well, not these. These were already arbitrary award. These were finalized.
Yeah,
Mike, initially it was proposed, the United Armenia.
Okay,
yeah.
So now let's go back in time to that time period. What was if you have any information on this, what was the Turkish reaction to these types of, call it proposals, or we're going to put this or implement this?
Right. That's a very good question. As I talked about Mustafa Kemal, basically, like the Ottoman government, the lawful government did agree, and they actually signed and agreed that as soon as the arbitral award is made, we're going to recognize that. And they actually did. They agreed initially that any decision made by the Allies, they would automatically, already when it's made, would recognize, and they did agree to it. In May of 1920, they just reaffirmed that we're going to do it. They signed the Treaty of Sevres, the Turkish delegation did, on August 10, 1920. But as I said, arbitral award was established to the San Remo. These are just maps of showing like the United Armenia, and then it's changing. These are various maps. That earlier one was a Norwegian.
Unbelievable how many different versions there are, man.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine a constant battle of back and forth of these maps?
Something changed.
And I feel like that's what's happening now, right? This whole back and forth, which map is going to be used, which borders. It's like history repeating itself. And that's the point.
We should definitely pursue the arbitral award maps because, that's affirmed and by international law. So it's not like fluid for us. We have a course. We have a course of action. We just have to pursue it in a right way.
Yeah. And that comes from the unity of every Armenian.
Exactly.
The diaspora, Armenia itself, the government, and unfortunately there's a huge division right now. And
as you guys talk so many times, that opponents of Armenia and Armenians have used this tactic of divide and conquer.
But again, it's not just with our history. You look at any world history. This is just a common tactic that's used. I mean, it's what.
Yeah, but we keep falling for it.
Yeah, well, listen, one can argue it stems from the art of war, from Sun Tzu, right? Dividing.
Of course.
But this has been used for millennia.
Yeah, before him.
It's not. Yeah,
it
sure.
was used before him.
Would have been like, hey, I'm going to write about this.
Yeah. He was perched up on a stone watching the teller.
These are just maps. So even after World War II, the British, that was a map made by the previous one made by the Foreign Office. They stated that, that Armenians continue to claim that, rightly so, that, this is a territory of Armenia occupied by Turkey. And even British Foreign Office made that map in 1946, saying that, boundaries established by Wilson. That was just showing that. And even USSR at that time, out of its own reasons, Stalin, he kind of changed his policy towards Turkey. He actually officially sent a note to Turkey saying that you are occupying part of this territory, and this territory is part of Armenia. So even Stalin, can you imagine, he was trying to utilize the arbitral award, but already to his advantage as a political weapon.
I was about to ask, why would he sort of alter, not change, but alter his stance on it?
Well, exactly. That's a very good question, because at this time, Turkey, during World War II, it supposedly was neutral, but in his eyes,
Supposedly.
it was sided with Germany against the USSR. It supported Germany.
Yeah, the Turks
And they actually opened in the USSR for foreign ministry. They opened a special case. They collected all these documents. Territories of Armenia occupied by Turkey. This is from 1940, from 44, 45, 46. So, and it opened up a case. And actually, as a core for this, they used the arbitral award of President Woodrow Wilson, saying, okay, this is the international boundary, and Turkey, it's in Russian. Turkey has occupied the territories of Armenia. So even Stalin in the USSR knew that the arbitral award is valid, but he tried to use it to his own ends. But we're not doing the same now as an independent country. Can you imagine?
Wow.
Here are actually Armenians, as you can see, gathered.
Honor President Wilson.
President Wilson's boundary of Armenia. Honor President Wilson's boundary of Armenia. This is 1946, 47. Armenians gathered in the United States in support of, once again, reestablishing historic justice, reestablishing the boundary between the Republic of Armenia and Turkey that continued to be occupied. Those 4 provinces occupied by Turkey.
Yeah.
Here, just a wider shot of the same event. I forgot 46 or 47. There were several, I believe, until 48, 49. The Armenian, and here it is again. This is another from 47. Again, just as you can see, so many delegates, even from not only United States, but other parts of the world. Armenian World Congress. This was Waldorf Astoria in New York from April 27 to May 2nd, I believe. This was held. Very important in 1947. Here we see a close-up shot in which you can see there was an important poster made at this time by an Armenian artist.
It's a famous poster.
Zaven Melik.
Yeah. And this,
you can actually show it like a close-up, same poster. It was it was an Armenian American artist, Zaven Melik. It basically, President Wilson points to those provinces and says that belongs to Armenia.
Yeah. This is the actual poster.
This is the actual poster.
Wow.
I have to post it. It's like a postcard, but this is the copy from that, just a little bit enlarged.
Yeah.
Big.
Wow.
I actually have the actual postcard. Okay, and on the far right, seated in the uniform, that's a very famous Armenian American general, Haik Shekerjan. He's actually the first Armenian American to graduate from West Point in 1911. So he's the first Armenian. He went to Armenia, Republic of Armenia, as part of the American military mission to Armenia in 1919. We'll talk about that more later on.
Okay.
Haik Shekerjan. On the far left, he was a big supporter of the Armenian cause, 1947, New York. Here's Haik Shekerjan when he graduated from West Point in 1911. First Armenian graduate.
I wonder his descendants. Do they know? Are they around? Do you know anything about his descendants?
Oh, that's a good question. I never looked into the descendants. Yeah. But he was an amazing Armenian, very patriotic, Yeah. And in World War II, he already became a brigadier general. So he was very decorated. After World War II...
This is him?
This is him.
As a general?
Haik Shekerjan, as a brigadier general, yeah. After World War II, he actually even helped a lot of Armenian POWs that were stuck in Germany to actually move to the United States. A lot of the Montebello Armenians from the 1940s, they actually...
Yeah, they were... Yeah.
The displaced persons, the DPs, he helped in the 1940s after World War II. You see, this is from 1960s. Armenian territories unlawfully occupied by Turkey.
And they still gave us water.
Yeah.
Exactly. But an important point to be made when we actually struggled for, recognition or reaffirmation. It's actually not recognition. Remember we talked about that? We have to say reaffirmation of the Armenian genocide. We should note that we should fight for eliminating those consequences that came about as a result of the Armenian genocide, which was Turkish occupation of Armenian historic lands. So when we fought for the Armenian cause, when we fought for the reaffirmation of Armenian genocide in the 50s, 60s, 70s, always it was mentioned that not only a genocide took place, but they actually killed the native Armenian population and occupied their land as a result of the genocide.
The indigenous people.
So the genocide was a tool to actually occupy their native homeland.
Yeah.
So
that's a key word, indigenous people.
Well,
that is so important.
Exactly.
Well, it's been a common practice to use not just with our heritage, but with many others. I digress.
Yeah. The colonists and these people, they always displace and try to eliminate, assimilate the natives. And these are just in different languages. That was in Spanish. This is in French.
Yeah.
So it was throughout the years this was used. And this is a
same map.
Yeah.
Same more or less same boundaries.
And this is a recent map that became, free, independent, and united Armenia. Azad, Ankakh, Miatyal Hayastan.
When you say recent, how recent?
Oh, this is, I mean, probably 5 years, 4 years. This
Really?
This is like, made to remember and remind that, this is the Armenian cause. It's not the Armenian cause. It's not just recognized Armenian genocide or whatever.
Yeah.
What about the territory that has been occupied by those that actually committed the genocide and killed the population that was living on its native soil?
Yeah.
That's called patricide, actually. Sometimes the word patricide, like elimination of the homeland of a people, is used. And this is amazingly a National Geographic map from 1991. So recent map. It even shows Armenia as a territory that still, they outlined it. This is as recent as 1991, in the National Geographic.
Interesting. Well, so much information to take in. I feel like I got to go back and watch this episode multiple times. Yeah. I want to thank everybody who's still sticking around with us. We're getting close to 3 hours. We're going to keep going because we still have quite a few information to cover. Where do you want to go from this? What do you want to talk about? Because we're kind of all over the place right now.
There's actually video.
Okay, you want to show that video?
I want to show that video. I don't know. Can you talk simultaneously?
Yeah. I actually want you to.
Some sound like.
There is some sound. I've lowered the sound so we can talk. I actually want you to narrate this. Okay. So guys, this is a video that has been pretty much brought back to color, and they added some sound to make it as real to seem as real as possible. They did a great job, and it's as clean as possible for the time.
Say a couple of words before you start, so I talk about the what's going. So basically, as I said, like President Wilson was a great friend, proponent of free, independent, and united Armenia. So he sent actually a military delegation, headed by General James Harbert to Armenia. So an American military mission was sent to Armenia, which included several Armenians, including Haik Shekerjian, as an officer. It was an officer of the American army at that time. Haik Shekerjian was part of it. There were other Armenians part of the mission, Armenian officers. Haruchun Khachatryan, for example, an Armenian officer serving in the American army, was part of it, and other Armenians also, Hagop Kazanjan, etc. So this American military mission to Armenia came, headed by James Harbert. He began in 1919. He landed through a ship from Paris in Constantinople. From Constantinople by land, he traveled to Mustafa Kemal occupied parts of Western Armenia, Arber, Sebastia, Karin, these areas. They traveled through there. Then they reached the Republic of Armenia, those parts of Armenia that were Armenian controlled. Kars, they first entered Kars. From Kars, they went to Gyumri and to Yerevan. So this footage, this is just part of it that has been colorized. That part, the film was made by the American military mission of James Harbert. So he made it, he documented, and he actually proposed, it was basically a fact-finding mission to Armenia. He said that, yes, United States should support Armenia, should be an ally of Armenia. There we go. Yeah, okay. So this is in Kars. This is the Armenian army marching in Kars, and the footage is taken by the American military mission to Armenia. That was the official name of James Barton mission. It was a large mission.
Wow.
It was a lot, and this is these are Armenian troops in Kars, which was still Armenia held. This is again James Harbert and other leading American generals and officers exiting Armenian government building in Kars. So this is September 27, 1919. He began. This is Armenian flag bearer. Do you see Armenian cavalry detachment? The original was actually black and white. This has been colorized.
It looks like it's trying to find some sort of color. Yeah,
it's been colorized, and sound effects had been added to make it more realistic. And this is already this is the mission already in Yerevan when it reached it. I believe September 29, 1919. 2 days later, this is a famous. Do you know the cognac factory? There's
which one?
The Hrazdan Zor Yerevan Ararat factory.
Yes,
this is right the canyon right there. Now the victory of Bridge at Hagtanaki Kamuj Vorasman. This is actually there, the Hrazdan Gorge, and this is Armenian honorary
Seriously. Yeah.
This is the Armenian cavalry detachments actually greeting the mission to Armenia.
This is wild. This is great footage.
You see, they actually came with their own cars, with their own provisions. The American military mission. This is already James Harbert, marching in streets of Yerevan. Today's Abovian Street, Hanrapetutian Street.
And back then.
Back then.
So crazy.
Yeah, this is American. This is Armenian army marching in honor of the mission.
This is unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah, taken by the Americans.
Oh my God!
Streets of Yerevan.
Many of Yerevan from over 100 years ago.
Many of these buildings are still standing, Mike. They're still standing. Unfortunately, some they toppled them down. I mean, it was sad, but many of these old buildings are still standing.
This is so cool.
These are the members of the Armenian cabinet. He just took a photo. General Araratian, famous.
Is that height?
Yeah. That's Alexander Khatisyan, the prime minister, with the hat and in the uniform. That's James Harbert, the general.
Okay.
So you see Harbert. Yeah.
This is
the Hrazdan Zor in that area. They also it's a panoramic shot of the Hrazdan Gorge that they took. Again, this is that area, right? Sultarkis area leading to the Ararat brandy factory. Yeah.
This is so wild.
Wild.
At the end, see, these are some survivors, as you can see, again, that they took a shot that impoverished and, in bad, condition. And this is already members of the mission leaving. Then they took the train back to Batum, and from Batum, through Georgia, they went to Batum, and from Batum, again, they took the ship, Martha Washington steamship, back to Constantinople, and from there to Paris and back to United States. This is going through the Straits of Bosphorus,
Bosphorus Strait,
yeah. Constantinople, and it basically the footage ends there.
This is unbelievable footage, man. This is crazy.
Yeah.
I'm speechless. I'm really speechless.
That's six Yerevan,
1919.
Yeah.
That's more than a century. Over 100 years, 104 years ago.
Cool.
Wow. This is amazing. Wow.
Plastered in some sort of color.
Yeah.
Who did it? It's available on YouTube for those that are interested. It's an Armenian guy. So kudos to him, you know. He actually took the time to do that.
Very proper.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Let's continue.
Okay.
Moving on. What are we jumping to? Where
We might be talking about a little bit of Syunik and Nakhichevan, maybe, huh?
Yes. So very importantly, as a result of this attack, maybe we skip few questions, but that's okay.
It's fine. I mean,
it's fine. Yeah. I mean,
that's not a thing.
yeah.
I mean, it's not that we skipped it; we covered
Yeah,
it. That's why I'm
right,
like trying
right,
to.
The Turkish reaction
Yeah,
to
yeah.
some of these maps and whatnot, right?
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
I think it would be wise to talk about what or followed this situation. What
Right.
happened to some of the provinces that were given to us and whatnot,
Yeah.
right?
So-
like Syunik, for instance,
Exactly.
and Nakhichevan,
Exactly.
and what happened with
Right,
Nakhichevan.
right. So
on
as
so
we
forth.
said, this was like, the Kemalists basically occupied those territories of western portions of the Republic of Armenia, right, including those 4 provinces of Western Armenia, including Kars. They occupied Kars. They occupied Ardahan once again, which was eastern Armenia. But the Azeris, with the help of the Bolsheviks, they initially staked claim at Artsakh, Syunik, and Nakhichevan. But Nizhde, Garagin Nizhde, the great military commander, said, we're going to resist. Yeah, we're going to resist at any cost. Syunik would never be part of this so-called Tatar entity. Obviously. And then, he vowed to resist, and very effectively so. In Syunik, he organized the resistance, Garagin Nizhde, commander, against these Bolshevik and Tatar hordes, and they never actually were able to actually take Syunik, and it remained de facto independent until mid 1921, until July of 1921.
Is this the uprising of 1920?
No, the uprising of 1920 was actually the Bolsheviks. I didn't talk about that much in that episode, but the Turks, when the Kemalists attacked, they only succeeded on the Kars front, but that actually collapsed when they were able to take Kars, helped them to basically push their forces deep inside Armenia. But for example, on the Igdir front, they weren't able to succeed because Dero very successfully, he repelled all their attacks. So I have to say, although unfortunately on the Kars front, our army didn't do as well against the Kemalists, who were again funded with weapons, with money by Lenin. Not only they were funded, the Kemalists, with those weapons, the Bolsheviks actually, this is the sad part, they were able to even bribe some generals and officers of the Armenian army to sabotage the defense of Kars.
The same old thing over and over again.
Can you imagine? That's why in Kars, they were able to so easily to penetrate Kars fortress and other areas, but on the Igdir front, they completely failed because the saboteurs were not as successful. The only criticism of Armenian leadership of the time, the defense minister, Ruben Terminasyan, he should have saw this coming, because in May of 1920, Bolsheviks already bribed same people, and there was so-called May uprising by these Bolshevik elements that already toppled the Kars local front and government as early as May of 1920. But the defense minister, Ruben Terminasyan, instead of sacking those people that were bribed by the Bolsheviks, including like generals, quote unquote, like Artem Hovsepian and others, he never removed them from power, and they remained on the Kars front for another half a year. So the same thing happened already. You should have known in May that area is the weak chain in your defense. You need to do some major changes. He didn't do that, the defense minister of the Republic of Armenia.
So more or less, you're talking about the Ottoman pressure, and now you have the Bolsheviks, more or less, I guess let's loosely say it, working together.
Yes, absolutely. They
More
work
or
hand
less.
in hand.
Yeah.
And after attacking and occupying and partitioning Armenia, they turned on the Greeks. Because the Turks were also the Kemalists.
And I'm not going to say the Russians, not because I'm a Russianist. I'm just saying the Bolsheviks.
Well, you're actually right, because the lawful Russian government, the provisional government of Alexander Kerensky, was very much in favor of Armenia.
Yeah.
Why? Because it also was supportive of the Allies. It was on the Ally side, but the Bolsheviks were not. Bolsheviks were sympathetic to Turks, even Germans.
Yeah.
And the Bolsheviks, even in Russian historiography, they were called great betrayers because, like I said earlier, according to the Brest-Litovsk Treaty, they handed over to the Germans some 1 million square kilometers of land of the Russian Empire. They just handed it away with a stroke of a pen.
Unbelievable.
And the Turks, they constantly used the Brest-Litovsk Treaty for all the later treaties that were imposed upon Armenia illegally. They constantly used that as a basis and a reference.
As far as Lenin and Mustafa Kemal, I mean, their collaboration to eradicate basically the independence of Armenia. What was the motive behind it? What was the main reason that they did this?
Right.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, as I said, mainly they were driven by the fact these two outlaw rogue regimes, not recognized by the international community. There was no.
But is that what they brought them together? That's what I mean. Like,
not only that was a part of it, but you're making that's a great question. The Lenin hoped that through Turkey, since the Caliph was the head of the Muslim world, they would be able to spread the Bolshevik revolution in the Muslim world, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So So Islam for them, Muslims, were important conduits of their own revolution, their world revolution. And he believed that if we get the Muslims on board, throughout the world, that would help to facilitate our world proletariat, quote unquote, revolution.
So this was a bigger agenda than what it seemed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, at the time.
Yeah, it was a huge agenda. I mean, Lenin believed that his revolution was a world revolution. I mean, and unfortunately, we even have some Armenian Bolshevik leader.
Sure, you're never going to have everything on one side.
But they were supportive of this agenda. They basically went against their own interests of their own people to support this so-called world proletariat revolution.
I'm glad you brought that up because Edgar had a good comment earlier when we were talking about the Bolshevik movement. We kind of touched upon it briefly, but who were these Armenian leaders that pretty much were supportive and kind of backstabbed, and what Nezhda was doing, everything that was happening, and you having the U.S. involved, you're talking about a huge Armenia being what it's supposed to be. Who were they, if you can name them, and why?
Well, some of them were actually, hardcore believers. They were converted to this creed in Russia. Others were simply, just tools, like even
Turncoats.
Useful tools, as even Lenin called them, people like that. Like basically they went along with what Lenin would tell them. They served the agenda. And why? Well, they had different reasons. Some actually believed that, others were simply useful tools, as I said, or useful idiots. Sometimes they're I think even Lenin used those terms.
Because it's even happening today in different parts of the world.
Right. So basically, for them, they actually believed that the nonsense. What is sad is, I mean, how didn't they realize that even Mustafa Kemal was playing them? He was a nationalist, hardcore nationalist, but he was pretending to be sympathetic to the Bolsheviks, even pretending when they attacked Armenia, these Kemalists even pretended that they're Bolsheviks, that they're also part of the Bolshevik movement, which was absolute nonsense. They were hardcore anti-Armenian nationalists.
Yeah.
And the Bolsheviks sided with them. So my, question would be to these so-called leaders of Armenian Bolsheviks, how could you support such a monster against they would even spread these flyers, this kind of propaganda in Armenian troops saying, don't fight the Turks, don't resist them. They're coming to save us. They're coming to help us.
Well, the obvious thought would be there were some sort of incentives for these factions or for these groups.
Well, a lot of the times they were simply funded. I mean, Lenin had these funds He paid the Kemalists. He paid like out of his own treasure, out of his own like arms, all these instigators, saboteurs, agents.
Are you kidding?
All of Armenia, Republic of Armenia, would cover these people. And incidentally, once the Kemalists came and occupied, they slaughtered around like 100 to 200,000 Armenians during the occupation period from late 1922. They remained in parts of Armenia as late as April of 1921. For those 5 months, they slaughtered some 150 to 200,000 Armenians. And these Bolsheviks, again, didn't have a reality check of what is going on. Like, after all of this so-called Armenian Bolshevik leaders, I'm not going to blame someone like Lenin, who could care less about the fate of Armenia and the Armenian people, you know? He could care less. He said, like, if I have to destroy half of the world to have my proletariat revolution, I'll do it.
Yeah, he did say that.
Yeah. So it's like, but these turncoats, like you're right, it basically like a fifth column, inside of Armenia.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I try to, put myself in their position and just from the human side and understand you had this Armenia that was giving back to you the lands that that are ours historically, indigenous people, and all of a sudden you fall for this propaganda and give away all that to what it is now. I mean, and what was your gain? What would they? It's like, when you do things, I can speak from as a man. Everything I do in my life, I think about, okay, how is this going to affect me? It's like a butterfly effect, right? Whatever I do, the choices I make, it's going to affect not just me. It's going to affect the people around me, my children, my wife, my friends, my family, everybody that I associate with. So to be so short-sighted and to make that decision to fall for whatever it was greed or usually it's greed, or ego, where they were going to be like, oh, I'm going to be a general part of this and this and that. But look at what it led to.
Right.
But again, to your point, you're thinking about something that's going to benefit you, your family, and your immediate surrounding, right? These people at the time, and this is based off of assumption. I can't put myself in that time period. I wasn't born then. These people were either bribed with some sort of false ideology, right? Or they thought just like what you just said, but more in an egotistical sense, where it was just like, well, okay, so how is this going to benefit me, my family, the people who surround me, and let's say funded by my handlers?
No, but when I say butterfly effect, I'm talking about it goes outside of just me, my family, and friends, because whatever affects me, let's say it affects you.
They didn't think about a greater cause.
Yeah, again, that's what I'm saying.
They didn't think about the bigger cause, futuristic cause. Yeah, that's the thing.
But if everyone
short-sightedness, like you said.
But listen, how many Bolsheviks? Obviously, this wasn't one man. This was multiple people that fell for this, right?
Absolutely.
So let's take if 1,000 of them fell for it, and if that 1,000 of them, the butterfly effect goes, it reaches to hundreds of thousands, right? If 200,000 fell for it, same thing goes into the millions. That's the point. If you think that way, I think that way, he thinks that way, everybody thinks that way, then that's it. It's done. Of course. Correct? Okay. That's my point. So I just cannot understand. Yeah.
And to add to that, Vic, you're absolutely right. The unfortunate thing, after the Bolsheviks, what remained of Armenia, this puppet state, I mean, obviously what Kemal took over, they eradicated any sense of Armenian, statehood. But in this puppet occupied, not recognized internationally Soviet Armenia, then they introduced all kinds of miseducation. All of this was covered up and hidden. And you had generations of Armenians who viewed these traitors as heroes.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you write what writes Anastas Mikoyan, for example, for them, he was lionized, he was hero. But when you actually open the archives and read what he was like, Armenia shouldn't be united, this territory shouldn't be given to Armenia, that's just an imperialist ploy. I mean, that's your homeland. People, your people have been genocided, and you're saying, oh, since President Woodrow Wilson had signed it, that's an imperialist ploy against, working people. I mean, Mustafa Kemal is the man of the working, like he exterminated your people. His underlings exterminated another 200,000 Armenians, continuing the Armenian genocide in Eastern Armenia. So you're supporting this. This is the type of monsters these people were, and they were heroized and.
Listen,
but you can't blame the people. You can't blame
I'm
the
not
people.
blaming them. Still, people today, they're still lionizing them.
Bingo.
Well,
bingo.
that's
to
just
this day, he's right.
Yeah.
He's absolutely right, because there's something about history that I've personally learned, and I'm not trying to get into this topic, maybe for some other podcast. But
what are you looking at? Who are you starting a podcast with? I'm just curious.
I'm just saying. But
I got 20% rights on that.
Give you 40%. If you want to join, but it seems like a lot of the people from our not so distant past that have been glorified have now kind of like, once these not truth, but the information starts coming out more rapidly about what really happened, like what we're talking about tonight. Like, wait a minute. These people were not so wonderful after all.
Exactly.
So many figures over the last, like, let's say 150 years at least.
I mean, there's, as they say, like real history, and then history that was written after
his story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the important. Like, we have to really discern, and we have to really dig deep into We have to. That's what we're doing.
Yeah,
it's amazing that what we're doing is so important. We've been saying it so much. You know,
that leads me to my next question, and then we'll have some other topics. We'll cover some other things, but kind of like to wrap this up. Obviously the Bolsheviks take over, everything falls apart. From everything we've shown and covered, what would you say the legacy is of the First Republic of Armenia?
Well,
good question.
Yeah, it is. Well, first of all, definitely, if we didn't have the First Republic, we wouldn't have even the puppet, the internationally not recognized Soviet Armenia. The Bolsheviks would, if they would take over this area, it would simply be part of this foreign territories. We wouldn't have this very important legacy in terms of international law. The recognition of the Republic of Armenia that was made in 1920, in January by the European allies, in April by the United States. And the United States incidentally recognized just the Republic of Armenia. It never recognized Georgia or Azerbaijan as independent republics. We would never have none of this. And then we would never have even the Armenia of today, our own independence, because like I said, simply it would be part of this neighboring states of, I don't know, so it would be just dissolved. The Bolsheviks, it will be part of, I don't know, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, whatever. Like, so it's so important that the Republic of Armenia we have today, the independent, even with all the challenges, even most, as we just found out, most of its territory being occupied, right, by Turkey and Azerbaijan, okay? So they should know, we should always point out, it's not Armenia's occupying other lands in Azerbaijan or whatever. It's the Azeris that are occupying, and the Turks also, the lawful territory of the Republic of Armenia. And that's affirmed by the League of Nations, because the League of Nations in 1920, it actually stated that those territories occupied by majority Armenian population, through a referendum, they get to decide what nation they want to be part of. Yeah. They want to be part of the Republic of Armenia. That's it. They don't want to be part of Azerbaijan. And when we say this, we have to make it clear this territory was not the Nagorno-Karabakh with these monsters, Nagorno Mountains, Karabakh, autonomous oblast, drawn on map by Stalin. It was a broader, larger territory that a lot of it was excluded from this autonomous Armenian region.
Yeah.
So to make the argument and to use the Stalin borders to affirm truths is absolutely against principles of international law and justice. You cannot make the argument like, how can you enforce the illegal occupation and partition of a sovereign nation recognized by the international community? How can you simply take that
by a rogue nation,
by a rogue regimes,
rogue regimes?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, for example.
I mean, for example, right? If you can even go there, Kosovo.
Yeah, exactly.
Kosovo.
Yeah.
What's been going on in Kosovo? If anybody knows about the situation after the post-Yugoslavian,
or for example, today, the annexation of Ukraine, for example, like you would say, oh, you know what? That's Russian territory because it's been annexed. But no, I mean, it's been recognized internationally as part of an independent nation. You can't just feed into that illegal, aggressive annexation and occupation, which happened to the Republic of Armenia and was stated as such by the international community, by the United States, by various European powers, countries. So, this is very important. This is the legacy that it's the reality. I mean, even as you know, even our flag, our coat of arms, our anthem, it's all based on the anthem, the coat of arms, the flags of the First Republic.
Yeah.
So obviously, today's Republic of Armenia is the legal successor of the First Republic. It should always pursue that. And not only through the flag, the coat of arms, and the anthem, but also legally through international law, through, first and foremost, through arbitral award of President Woodrow Wilson, which affirms that only would help us internationally on the legal stage, on the diplomatic stage. It would not weaken us, because you hear these voices that say, oh, come on, that we don't need that now. Remember, we had the earlier questions. Why do we need that now? You need that. That would actually help you
it's grounds
and
for
strengthen
argument.
you diplomatically. It would not weaken you. It was not threaten you. If Artsakh was recognized as part of the Republic of Armenia, Aliyev would think twice in 2020 to attack it. But we never did that. Artsakh never gained that recognition, so it was easily attacked.
By our own country. You're talking about us recognizing Artsakh, Armenia recognizing Artsakh.
Armenia, and also pushing the international community to recognize that Artsakh is an integral part of Armenia.
So maybe they
but it starts with Armenia. If Armenia never recognized it, why do you
necessarily recognize that they didn't do enough?
This is what I'm trying to say. You're right.
He's saying they didn't do
like
enough.
you can even recognize it, but you have to you have to take diplomatic steps and have like agreement. For example, like France, for example, which has a very pro-Armenian, very policy, allied policy. It can say, well, okay, you can have this agreement, reach an agreement. This is what, like, if Armenia does it, like, for example, the next day we're going to do it, or like 2 hours later, France would do that. Through diplomatic channels, you have to reach that consensus. But you haven't done your homework. You haven't reached that level. Okay. We just basically slept at the wheel, and let the war happen as it is. We didn't protect us. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So no, I don't think that's the case. I think there was more involved, and
of course there was more involved.
Just like it's all has to do with money, greed, and that. Us Armenians have this.
You're not just dealing with like one or two nations. You're dealing with. God, I mean,
of course, I understand.
Involved with this part of the world.
Absolutely.
But we had, like Georg said, we have so much evidence and proof to have diplomatic rights to do these moves and come out as a winner. And we never used it. But because there's always outside influence. We are always holding the hand of.
The question is, and I hate to back this question, but it's true. What do they have to gain from us?
Another episode.
Like I said, and this goes with a ...
Yeah.
We don't have to talk about this right now, but that is the primordial question.
Magjan, the fact that, for example, United States has one of the biggest embassies in the world in Armenia is also already kind of affirming that, like maybe President Wilson was right, because he said like, only United States long-term presence can be through Armenia. Middle East would remain unstable for long time because you can never have. And there were people saying, "Oh no, Turkey is this secular Islamic country." I mean, history proved that there's no such a thing as a secular Islamic country. I'm sorry.
Do you think today's Russia is different from the Bolshevik movement as far as claiming to be our friend and obviously we know they've backstabbed us so many times.
Right.
Especially now we see them holding hands with Aliyev and everything.
Absolutely. Putin's Russia is in, cahoots with Erdogan, with Aliyev. He has great, and it's like because it's authoritarian country, one man decides a lot. I mean, unfortunately, I cannot even say Russia, because he's the decider,
Yeah.
He decides on those things. But he also there's a lot of like Turkish agents and things like that. I mean, openly, they're just basically like using soft power in the Kremlin, in the halls of the Kremlin, to sort of like influence him. And he kind of went along with that. The Turks have done what we haven't done for many times. They slowly but surely they built up this sort of like agenda. And we talked about earlier, you can be sure about it. Even the attack on Artsakh was coordinated years before it happened.
Yeah.
Erdogan, so there was this deal, this package deal that they agreed to, and Artsakh was part of that package deal which was against us, against our interests.
Yeah. So everything that we presented to our audience, everything we talked about, and obviously you're going to be back. We're going to be covering the Armenian American side of things, and then we're going to talk about the Armenian question. So we got 2 more episodes with you, and then we obviously have our
you're going to see
event.
a lot more of them.
Live event. And the reason why we want to do this is we want to take advantage of the situation to get all this information out, because when you guys come to our live event, by the way, only 2 of you have scanned that QR code. It's up in the corner. Scan it, go purchase your tickets. Everybody needs to be at this event.
I did promise somebody a question from earlier.
Okay.
I took a screen grab of it just because I knew it was going to get lost in the comments. Gev, this is a little bit earlier in our conversation.
Okay.
And David Saakyan asked, Gevorg, is it true that General Andranik ultimately had a falling out with the government of the First Republic? If so, what was the reason?
Okay, that's a good question. We actually kind of covered that in the General Andranik episode, so I recommend him. Was it David
Saakyan.
David, I recommend David you watch the Mer Hersoner.
It was about a 2.5 hour
episode on General Andranik. I do cover that part in detail, but I will briefly say.
Just briefly.
Yeah. Well, kind of he did, because as I talked, he was against the Treaty of Batum. He never, trusted the Turks very firmly. Not only trusted, obviously resented what they had done to Armenia and what we're continuing to do. So his main issue was initially, I mean, he had like disagreements with the ARF, the leading party at that time of the Republic of Armenia. Even before that, when they started, doing things like collaboration, etc. So that this on part of Andranik, his sort of reservations were kind of justified, and the Treaty of Batum was something that he completely rejected. He basically said that he's going to continue the struggle. He did that. He had the striking division, the Armenian striking division, which operated in Syunik, Nakhichevan, and Artsakh. He was actually about to enter Artsakh, but he was turned back. Promised that Artsakh, through self-determination, through a referendum, would actually be part of the Republic of Armenia, and that's what League of Nations decided upon. So yes, he kind of did that. Then in 1919, on April 27, 1919, he left Armenia on a train from Vagar Shapat. He basically disbanded his division, his fighting men, laid down their arms. Some joined the forces of the regular army of the Republic of Armenia. He sold his horses, arms, but he never stopped closely working with the Republic of Armenia's government. Right. So it's not totally true that he totally disconnected. He continued to work through the national delegation. He was very close with Boris Nubar. So he continued to working with the national delegation. At one point, he was a prominent member of the ARF, but later, as I said, he believed that they could never be compromised with those that basically carried out the genocide and all those massacres. He was firm on that. But then he continued his work with the national delegation, and then he even in the United States from until early 1920s, even 1921, he continued to raise funds for the Armenian army.
Yeah.
Because technically, although, Armenia had fallen in 1920, but as we know, Nizhde was even fighting as late as 1921. We didn't talk much about Nizhde, but in Syunik, he established this free mountainous Armenia that never... And he only left, Nizhde left Armenia when the Soviets promised that it would be part of Soviet Armenia, Syunik.
Yeah.
He said, okay, then I'll lay them out.
We have a very special episode that we'll be doing about Nizhde. It's going to be, again, I've talked about this before, guys. This is going to be shot a different way. It will be pre-recorded. It won't be live. It's a special. We want to pay homage to this.
It's going to be more of a production.
It's going to be a production episode. So some people are going to be involved in this. So we want to do this the right way. Everything that we've shared with our audience and everything you have given to us, what is the message? What message should be sent to our audience? What should motivate them? Why pay attention to this stuff? You know, it's very important because people sit there. Sometimes they think we're sitting here like just talking about the good old days and this and that, and for some reason people don't understand how important history is. So, can you, from your point of view, why should people, Armenians, non-Armenians, pay attention to what we're putting out here? And how it can help us for the current situation and for the future.
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, just specifically what we presented, this is actual topic that today holds importance in terms of, political realities that we're facing. I mean, look at Artsakh. If we never made our case about Artsakh, like I said, we never talk about this. We never made our case about the issues facing Syunik at the same time. We never made our case how so-called Azerbaijan came about, that today is actually claiming that all of Armenia is part of Azerbaijan. I mean, we talk about that, it was a fake state. It was a pan-Turkish project set up by Nuri Pasha, the brother of Enver Pasha. We talked about this, but our people don't talk enough about this. And they say all of Armenia is today Azerbaijan. Aliyev says that, right? Yeah. He says all of Armenia, Yerevan is Azerbaijan. Yeah. We have to constantly confront that. How do you confront that? With historic facts. If you don't know historic facts, how do you say you're lying?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And I've maintained it. We know he's an intelligent man. Yeah. We know that. We know that about his education. We know he's an intelligent man.
He thinks he can get away with a monstrous lie. He thinks he can get away with it. If he's not challenged, he's going to get away with it. If we keep silent.
He knows he has to lie to his people.
Yeah. If we don't confront him, if we remain silent, if we're ignorant, I mean, the biggest weapon is information and truth. I mean, and about everything else, even the earlier periods that you covered, I mean, even our origins, even that has political connotation, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Because they say, wait a minute, no, Armenians weren't native indigenous on their soil. They were like from other lands. No, they're not native people. That has a political connotation.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we also have Armenian intellectuals who
even some Armenians buy into it. Like I said, they use term Eastern Anatolia for Armenia, which is completely false. I mean, it's just
the term Anatolia.
Anatolia doesn't apply, and Eastern Anatolia is I mean, it's mind-boggling. I don't know. I mean, it's like
so. To everybody who watches us, listens to us, those of you who listen to us on the podcast platforms. Do us a favor. Anytime you hear the word Anatolia or Eastern Anatolia, you're going to say, correction, it's called Armenian Highlands.
Exactly.
And that's the bottom line. And you guys need to program this in your heads. So correct everyone who ever says that. Anybody who talks about Turkey, especially Western Armenia, constantly mention Armenian Highlands. But we need to imprint this in everybody's minds. So that way, they themselves will start doing research and curiosity. Be like, man, why is this guy or this woman? Why do they keep talking about Armenian Highlands? Let me go look it up, and then they'll find our content. They'll find Gevork's content. They'll find all this stuff. This is what needs to be done. This is a movement, guys. We got to do this. So help us, help yourselves, help our community. Let's get this going. Maybe not for our generation, for the younger generation.
Absolutely.
And to that point, I want to mention, I want everybody who is locally, and if you're not local, you can actually come attend to the March 30th event. We have both QR codes, scan it, purchase the tickets. Use promo code TAMART, which will give you 50% off if you're going to buy more than 2 tickets. Tickets are only $20, guys. That means it's $10. I mean, I'm sorry to say this. If you can't pay 10, come by. It's going to be a great event. We have 500 seats available. We want to fill this. We're going to have live music, social hour. We're going to have drinks. We're going to have finger foods. We're going to have some great prominent people joining us.
By the way, those tickets don't even cover the price that has been paid.
Yeah.
If they want, if you're making money or something.
Yeah, we're not making money.
We're to make that point clear.
Yeah, this is trying to help us to at least balance it as much as possible. We're not millionaires here. We're doing this out of love, and at the same time, I want to thank the sponsors. We have sponsors who have joined the movement. Thank you, guys. This is going to help us to pay for the video production. It's going to help us to pay for the audio production.
Cover a few costs.
Yeah, and we still have a couple of spots left. If you're a business owner and you guys want to sponsor us, reach out to us for this event. Email us at info@merhersoner.com, or you can just message us on Instagram account, and we'll give you guys the 2 options we have. And we want to see everybody there. This is going to be an amazing event, and bring your kids who are old enough to understand this. Bring them. We want them there. Yeah. Having said that, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. We love you. This is amazing. You're going to be back with us 2 more times. Like I said, we're going to cover 2 more.
We're putting the man to work.
Yeah. What else? Everyone who joined us, thank you so much, guys. Like I said, hit that thumbs up button.
Narina, no, he does not.
No, he does. What?
Does he belong to any political party?
No, I don't.
No, he does not.
I'm independent.
Yeah. He is a historian to the core.
Well, I don't think as a historian it would be right to be part of a political party.
I mean, you can be, but
if you
I'm
want
not.
to.
I mean, that's just the truth of it. You can be. As a genuine historian, you have to be impartial. So I try to be impartial, even like within our own political spectrum. So, never belong to a political party, never plan to, and then I'm a scholar.
You're a part of the scholar party.
Yeah.
All right, so we've been on for about 3.5 hours. I want to thank everyone who stuck around. Thank you, guys. Those of you who missed the beginning, you can go back and watch it. The audio version will be up on all podcast platforms tomorrow morning. I'm going to try to edit this all night and get it out there. This is what I do.
Just do it tomorrow morning. Man.
No, man, I got meetings in the morning. So follow us on Instagram. It's at Mer Hersoner. Again, guys, support the show. Besides coming to the event, like I said, we have so much happening. We also have the Forgotten Thrones animation series that we are putting together. First episode script is almost done. We're working with some interesting people who might be involved. Some great prominent people, Armenian prominent people. And our goal is to have this ready as soon as possible. And then work on the next episode. This is going to be 10 episodes. So the way you guys can support us is either go to Patreon, which is patreon.com/Mer Hersoner, become a Patreon, or on YouTube, you can become a member. It starts at $3 a month. I'm sure a lot of you can afford that, or $5 a month starting at Patreon. And we're going to take all this and use it for these amazing projects. To those of you who are listening to us, who are school teachers or might be involved in Armenian schools, please spread the word about the podcast and about the event. Like I said, I can't stress this enough how important it is for people to be at this event. Because if this is successful, we have multiple. We're going to do this over and over with not just Gevorg, with other
people with knowledge.
Yeah, not just with Gevorg. Obviously, we're going to have other intelligent, prominent historians, Armenian historians, non-Armenian. Our goal is to involve the non-Armenian community in this
Absolutely.
as well, and have a healthy dialogue.
Exactly.
You
And
know?
just as importantly, please understand to those people that say, okay, why? I mean, we can do all of this in Armenian, but the point is also, especially the new generation Armenians that unfortunately, they're more fluent.
Which is okay.
Which is okay. They're fluent in English. We can't lose those people. Okay, there are, and of course our friends, our non-Armenian friends whom we love, our brothers and sisters. They have to know about Armenian history just as much.
Yeah.
We can't just constantly preach to the choir. I mean, it's like
and I think, and this is something I talked to with a lot of my colleagues and friends, and I think one of the biggest weapons we have to start creating is telling our stories through media, through content, through the storytelling, through movies,
and through an international language that is recognized globally.
Yes. Enough with keeping it within our
Billions
circle.
and billions of speakers.
We've kept it within our circle for hundreds of years now. And what has it gotten us? Okay, we can tell the story to ourselves. Fine, we know it, but we need to get it out to the world. So those of you who are creatives, hey, reach out to us. Maybe we can help you. You got a story to tell. Anything.
We can all help each
it
other.
has to have an Armenian element and get it out there. We have the talent. We have the people who can help us fund these things. It's out there. But besides that, again, I want to thank everybody who joined us tonight. Georg, thank you again. We'll have you back in a couple of weeks again. As we always say at the end of every show, respect one another.
Love one another.
And till the next episode, take care of yourselves.